keynote address, you have Consul General Judith Ravan, US Consul General Chennai, and the keynote speaker of the day, Dr. C. N. Ashwatthanarai, Ministry for Electronics, Information Technology, Biotechnology, Science and Technology. So, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and warm welcome to our chief guest, please. Guest of the day, please. I request all the delegates to kindly occupy the seats in this auditorium, please, so that we shall start the opening session. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A hearty welcome to the dignitaries and delegates for the opening session of the Bangalore Technology Summit 2022. There are going to be panel discussions on various interesting topics. We have experts with us to throw light on various aspects during these discussions. Before we commence the opening session, the first opening session of today's program, I take this opportunity to introduce Ms. Ambika Sharma, Managing Director, USIBC India, to this August gathering. Ms. Ambika Sharma is the Managing Director for India at the US India Business Council. She is currently leading the India team of USIBC, which brings expertise across a range of sectors, including finance, defense, life sciences, legal services, and technology, providing corporate and non-profit members with services from policy advisory and market analysis to brand amplification. Prior to this position, Ms. Sharma was the Director General International at the Federation for Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, FICCI. During her 3 decades career, she led several innovative and impactful initiatives with FICCI across different geographies and foreign trade policy division teams. A business economist by profession and alumni from India's prestigious Delhi University, where she graduated with a gold medal. She is currently also on board of several companies as an independent women director. May I request, Madam, for your welcome address, please?
Good afternoon, good evening. Honorable Minister Dr. Ashwath Narayan. Everybody knows he's holding so many portfolios, sir. Minister for IT, Science and Technology, Higher Education, Skills, Entrepreneurship, and I'm very impressed, sir, with the livelihood aspect of the state you are looking at. Our very, very respected Council General Judith Ravan. Very good afternoon to you. Members of the US India Business Council, friends in the technology capital of Bengaluru, and my colleagues from US IBC, I would really like to recognize them. They're all here. Jay, who has specially flown in from Europe to be there, Sandeep and Aditya. So the full team is here, sir, working with your team. So, starting my opening welcome, I would first of all like to place on record, sir, sincere thanks to the state of Karnataka for giving us this opportunity and organizing such a mega show. So, on behalf of the US India Business Council, which I'm representing, I welcome all of you to the inaugural session of the India US Technology Conclave. We are, on behalf of our parent chamber, which is the US Chamber, the largest in the world, and considered as the fifth pillar of US government, we also take that opportunity to welcome Council General Judith Ravan and Minister Ashwath Narayan for supporting us in hosting this India-US Technology Conclave on the potential of innovation and technology, which really is going to lead the growth of the US-India economic corridor. Friends, as you would be aware, that this conclave is encompassing wide range of activities. Over the next 2 days, we shall have various sessions focused on the Quad, where the US-India strategic relationship continues to deepen and expand, and the US-India initiative on critical and emerging technology, which is ICT, is aligning with the government scientific investment in labs, industrial research, academia, you name anything, and it relates to that. We are very, very enthusiastic that this is going to open a lot of doors of partnership between the India-US corridor. We shall also be taking and forward the discussion of the brave new world of the metaverse, which is the emerging 3D enabled digital space that uses virtual reality, augmented reality, and we see many young people and many young startups who have registered. And I was very impressed to hear that close to 2,000 people have already registered. So we are hoping that this would be quite beneficial for all. We shall also be hearing in the course of today and tomorrow some TED-style talks from our members, who are largely the CEOs from big companies, members of our India Advisory Council. Some names are very familiar to Karnataka, like Intel, MD, Nivruti Roy, to name a few. So what I basically wanted to highlight that this conclave, which is going to be open, and we'll be soon hearing the vision of the Honorable Minister, rather who has envisioned the whole plan of Bangalore Technology Summit, which I think, very happy to note, it is going to be Asia's biggest summit. And on the day two, which is tomorrow, we shall, sir, focusing on the augmentation and creating some intellectual property through cross-border innovation issues also. So we have created different sessions between today and tomorrow, and we'll be joined by the industry, academia, and the bureaucracy, and of course, special thanks to our reps from the US Embassy, who are really partners in this growth story. And just to mention as a side note, without taking not taking much more time, that we shall also be using tomorrow the opportunity of this technology summit to sign a very, very significant MOU with USAID, which will really pave the way of deeper partnership between industry and the USAID in the various areas, also related mainly to the technology world. So with these warm words, I just welcome you once again, and we look forward to hearing from you, Council General Judith Revin, for your keynote remarks. Are you introducing? You are introducing her? Yeah. Okay. She'll be formally introduced by our MC. Thank you. Please.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for the welcome address. Now it's my proud privilege to introduce Consul General Judith Ravan. Judith Ravan assumed the position of Consul General at US Consulate General Chennai in September 2020. Before that, she served in Lima, Peru as Consular for Public Affairs. Her foreign service career has included assignments to Haiti Desk in Washington, D.C., Pakistan, Dominican Republic, Sudan, Cameroon, and Mexico. Consul General Rabin joined the U.S. Department of State in 2003, following many years working in Asia, Africa, Latin America as an editor, translator, and journalist. She did her undergraduate work at universities in France and Spain, in addition to the United States, and holds a master's degree in Romance languages and literatures from Harvard University. Ma'am, may I request you for the keynote address, please? Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to readjust these microphones and probably adjust them again shortly. So we all know that Minister Dr. Ashwat Narayan has many portfolios, and we were just saying that perhaps the best summary is Minister of Converse, but I will name them. He is from the Ministry of Electronics, Information Technology, Biotechnology, Science and Technology, higher education, skill development, entrepreneurship, and livelihood of the government of Karnataka. It's more than a metaphor. And US-India Business Council leadership, tech for next gen and industry leaders and distinguished guests. I'm thrilled to be here in person to inaugurate the US-India Tech Conclave, curated by the exceptional US-India Business Council team. Thank you, USIBC Managing Director Ambika, for inviting me to be part of today's event. And my sincere gratitude to the Bengaluru Tech Summit organizers, in addition to the government of Karnataka's Department of Electronics and Information Technology, Biotechnology, Science and Technology, as well as, of course, the minister himself. And thank you to Software Technology Park India. This will be the third time I am giving remarks at the Bengaluru Tech Summit, and yet it is the first time I have the pleasure of speaking to you in person. While the COVID-19 pandemic impacted the lives and livelihoods of billions of people around the world, human ingenuity and innovative technologies helped us both fight the spread of COVID-19 and equip ourselves with new ways to collaborate and conduct business with our global partners. In addition to my team from Chennai and the US Commercial Service Office here in Bengaluru, I'm also joined by interagency colleagues from US Embassy in New Delhi, the Trade and Technology Unit, US Patent and Trademark Office, Health and Human Services, and the US Agency for International Development. The strength of our nation reflects the importance that the US government places on this gathering and on economic partnerships with India in a wide range of science and technology fields. I encourage you to take the opportunity to engage with my US government colleagues at the United States Mission India booth in the exhibition hall. As you likely know, the United States is India's largest trading partner, with $160 billion in bilateral trade in 2021. When it comes to foreign direct investment, the United States is India's largest investor, with a wide range of companies injecting tens of billions of dollars into the Indian economy, including through technology firms like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, IBM, Cisco, Intel, among many others. There are more than 650 US companies represented here in Bengaluru alone, most of which are leaders in the tech sector. As we celebrate global entrepreneurship all week this week, I want to recognize the entrepreneurial spirit that bonds our two nations, private sectors, and fuels technological advancements in both countries. The commercial ties between our two nations are indeed mutually beneficial. India has recently overcome the United Kingdom to become the world's fifth largest economy. As India's economy continues to expand, the opportunities to further strengthen our bilateral relationship, particularly in the fields of science and technology, for both public and private sector entities are vast. Clearly, US and Indian companies are driving technological innovation to new heights by continuing to work seamlessly together. Our economies are intertwined in countless ways. This year, the US government has taken steps to advance our bilateral relationship with India in the field of science and technology. Yes, national science India, including to promote joint US research projects involving principal investigators from both nations for collaborative research that can accelerate the development of new technologies, tools, and systems for mutual societal and economic benefit. Dr. Panchanadan also announced the selection of US supplemental funding, awards totaling 2.8 million dollars for research projects focusing on areas like artificial intelligence, data science, and edge computing. Just a few months prior to that, in May, Associate Administrator of US National Aeronautics and Space Administration, Dr. Thomas Zerbachan, met with his counterparts in the Indian Space Research Organization. As the two space agencies work to develop one of the most sophisticated and advanced synthetic aperture radars ever designed. The NASA ISRO Synthetic Aperture Radar, or NISAR, one of NISAR's largest bilateral projects to date, at a cost of $1.5 billion, will help the world better understand and comprehend the effects and pace of climate change. NASA and ISRO continue to examine new avenues of collaboration in the fields of science and technology. Also in May, during a meeting between US President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Narendra Modi, our two nations announced the launch of a United States-India initiative on critical and emerging technologies, spearheaded by the National Security Councils of the two countries to expand partnerships in the development of critical and emerging technologies. We also agreed to join 6 of India's technology innovation hubs to support at least 25 joint research projects in areas such as artificial intelligence and data science to advance progress in applications for agriculture, health, and climate. The list goes on and on. The bottom line is that our two nations are collaborative partners in a wide range of fields in information technology, artificial intelligence, space, and climate change mitigation, just to name a few. As US Secretary of State Antony Blinken stated during a recent visit by External Affairs Minister Dr. Subramanian Jaishankar, we see more room to grow and to do it in a way that creates jobs for workers in both of our countries. The US-India Commercial Dialogue, the US-India CEO Forum, will give us more opportunities to do that in the months ahead. Once again, thank you for this opportunity to underscore the integral ties between our two nations' economies and how our collaborative relationship drives innovation and inspires nations here in India, in the United States, and across the globe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your valuable words. May I now request Dr. Syed Ashwathanarayan, Ministry for Electronics, Information Technology, Biotechnology, Science and Technology, Higher Education, Skill Development, Entrepreneurship and Livelihood, Government of Karnataka. So, please.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon to all the delegates, dignitaries. We are assembled here for the today's US India Business Council conclave. This is the second edition. The first edition was through virtual. The second edition now is in the physical format. So we really appreciate the US EC coming forward to be part of the Bengaluru Tech Summit. I think something which we are looking forward for the coming together, since US and India were natural partners. In the Bengaluru Tech Summit, we are missing the surface. Though we have a large presence of US companies, the natural home in India is for US companies, it is Bengaluru and Karnataka. So that being the case, the conclave was really missing. The collaboration between the US and India is totally, with regard to the BTS, something it was really missing. We are having the presence of the various companies as many of the international speakers to be part of many of the sessions. Today, we are extremely happy to have this direct collaboration between the India and US business conclave. So on this occasion, we have our most dynamic US Consulate General, Mrs. Judith Ravind, who is here, always been actively participating and connecting with us and reaching out to us. Many occasions, many a times, we are working and reaching out to each other. And we share an extremely good relationship between both the countries, and as well as through our consulate generals and our department. The people to people, institution to institution, and diplomacy level, the government level, in all levels, we have been sharing extremely good relationship. So even geopolitically or strategically, many good reasons for all of us to come together. As well as we have on the same dais, we have US-India Business Conclave MD Ambika Sharma, who is leading this very conclave. I really appreciate your presence, Ambika. And as well as the dignitaries, I will not take much of your time. Since how, for the time in the past 3 decades, how things have changed and how the relationship has built, and how India, and especially Karnataka and Bangalore, is being to contribute in the terms of service. It started with service, then it scaled up to R&D, then to the products and innovation. So the journey has been very interesting. We have grown over the time and emerged by that word. And it has become really very promising to see the kind of growth, what has happened, the transition or the transformation, what has happened has been really very impressive. So further to add strength, to facilitate, encourage, enable, to facilitate in this direction, under the leadership of our Honorable Prime Minister, he's been always leading from the front, taking up the right decision, right policy, right initiatives. That is what has led to a great transformation in the entire country. So similarly, under his leadership, we were able to implement and take it forward in the state of Karnataka also. The state of Karnataka has been always very progressive state. Always has been very progressive state. Even before pre-independence, Karnataka, Bangalore was known for science. It was known for science. From the science was our main foundation. From science we were able to evolve and go into a bigger level that has sustained, and we see future as the United States has been seen as in a land of opportunity, a land of future. Similarly, in India or in entire Asia, Bengaluru is emerging as the land of opportunity and the land of future. That is a kind of scaling what is happening, how US has been attracting the talent, how futuristic the opportunities, the kind of opportunity what the students used to get. It used to be their destination and dream to pursue their education, to gain more knowledge. They used to look up to United States. For the kind of institution what has been established over there, it's been always a top attraction. So looking forward, even in India, we are trying to, particularly in the state of Karnataka, we understood what needs to be done to scale up and to ensure the talent, because the 21st century is more to do with the talent. It is knowledge-based economy. How knowledge needs to be scaled up. It is not just only quantity. We are working on quality. So probably all the challenges, whatever challenges with regard to sustainability, or doing right things, addressing all the challenges, whatever is been faced by the society, socially, politically, economically, in the terms of quality, all these concerns can be very effectively addressed with the right kind of education and skilling. So working inwards and ensuring the way the things need to be done, we have brought a lot of reforms on national education policy, has become the greatest enabler. The greatest enabler, ensuring way the education needs to be provided, has been looked into it, and we took the initiative of implementing the national education policy. We were the first state. In this direction, we are ensuring that state of Karnataka is a destination, not only for innovation and technology, for learning. So our mantra is now learn, work and live. Come here to learn and work and live. So we are also building institution and enabling and facilitating the growth of the institution in a right way, enabling in the terms of the quality of learning, governance, leadership, holistic development, and comprehensively, we are trying to ensure the very concept of learning has been done properly. So whatever the best practices, the concept of learning has been emphasized. So we have grown to one stage to sustain and to utilize and to ensure the sustainability over the time. The right kind of foundation has to be strengthened. So understanding fully what needs to be done, we have been working in this direction, and as well as coming out with right policies. The policy, whatever the industry has been facing, we are completely connected with the industry. There's no gap. The industry has been very well connected with the government, and along with this, we have vision groups. We have 3 vision groups, and recently we started one digital economy mission, that is the 4th one, which is completely connected. The industry is very comfortable when it comes to addressing their concern. Whatever there might be their concern, they reach out to the government through these vision groups or the digital economy mission, and most of their concerns are effectively addressed, thereby ensuring the kind of what ecosystem needs to be built. We're ensuring the right kind of ecosystem has been built and facilitated. Not only just enabling how best we can adapt. So once the good things are happening, how we need to integrate, adapt, and this thing needs to be integrated. So probably in this direction, adoption also has been happening in a very big way in education, in agri-tech, in climate, in mobility, climate, all possible areas. We want to achieve the complete ICE-free vehicles. Probably down the line, next year, 10 years, probably we will be the first state in the entire world to be completely electric, completely to be sustainable, electric or biofuel or hydrogen, whatever it might be. The flexibility in having that kind of self-reliance, we are working, probably be achieving. Even the kind of research, what is happening, the R&D is really very impressive in the terms of storage or the electric vehicles. So it's very promising with regard to climatic or the ethical, even the ethical aspect. We are trying to emphasize more and more how to be more ethical, because that's very important. How much you invent, it should not become a counterproductive. So we need to be a better place to live, and with regard to safety and security also, we are giving topmost emphasis, because the digitalization post-COVID, the digitalization has gone to rapid pace, and digitalization is happening everywhere, and virtualization, digitalization is become the norm. So even the metaverse, you'll be surprised, madam. The electric vehicles in a rural area, they're making use of metaverse and selling the electric vehicles, electric motorcycles have been sold in rural areas by using metaverse. And already it has been used and it has been put to use and people are making use of it. So we are looking way forward, democratizing all the technology. It is not just limiting to few places. So democratizing the investment technology is a way forward, since this should become more equitable and inclusive. So to take to every part, and people should really get benefited with the whatever latest invention. So Web 3.0 also we have been promoting in a big way. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, IoT, drone, robotics, all possible area. The kind of resource, whatever needs to be generated, we are giving topmost priority, as well as the opportunity to learn. Almost all our institution, if you look at the kind of whatever might be the requirement of the skilled manpower in the terms of blue collar or white collar technologies, in whichever levels, there's a great complementation or supplementation of the workforce. We have been supporting, skilling them, and creating the right kind of institution and upgrading all the institution in ITI, polytechnics, community colleges, GTTCs, KGTTI, engineering colleges, and come out with the right kind of doing things. So this will enable us and facilitate what is the most important is the talented workforce, the kind of supply what the industry is looking forward, not only for our state, for entire country and the entire world. Wherever there's a requirement of manpower, we're willing to address all the requirement for the entire world, for the country, and for the state, because that is our strength, which we need to address very strongly. So we are always into best practices, and US always we have been a natural partner and highest trading as your numbers, what you mentioned, $160 billion trading between both the countries, are the foreign direct investments, are the company's presence, RDs, GCCs, GICs. The GCC capital of our country is Bengaluru. GIC capital, R&D, you name all the areas, whichever areas, we are in the forefront. So it's been very promising, and we want to further strengthen and facilitate and enable. Probably the very organizing of Bengaluru Tech Summit is to celebrate, is to recognize the kind of talent what is available, the kind of technology been developed here, showcasing. And this is a place for all of us to come together, share the advancement, and as well as recognize the good work done by many of the technologists and innovators. And how best we can address future challenges, how we can collaborate, how we can work together jointly with regard to the startups or research. We can all work together. Now the government of India is opening up all the areas. The defense has been completely opened up. The space has been completely opened up, which was something unimaginable. Aerospace, the space, everything has been opened up. So all the areas, it is more so, our Honorable Prime Minister makes in a statement, the first right is for the entrepreneur. No country, no leader can make this kind of statement. They are the asset creators. They need to be recognized. They need to be respected. It's a message to the bureaucrats. It's been given clear message. You need to respect the entrepreneurs because they are the asset creators. That is a kind of tendency or the attitude what has been developing in our country to respect the right things. So way forward, anybody and everybody can feel the real liberal or forward-looking country or the state will be India and Karnataka. If it comes to India, it will be Karnataka, state of Karnataka. So it's state of Karnataka also, we're not trying to hold on to anything. The government is functioning more as an enabler and as a facilitator. And we are not trying to dictate. Even if you look at the very creation of Karnataka Digital Economy Vision, that shows the very example how the government of Karnataka has been functioning. So with regard to many other issues, we are willing to address and ensure all the concern of the citizens of Bengaluru will be addressed very strongly, and it will be completely from the top man to last man. It will be a completely inclusive society and a very progressive society. Anybody can dream and anybody can dream and become big. So anybody can realize their dream. It is not just limited to any few people. So that is a kind of environment or ecosystem been created in the state of Karnataka. With these few words, with regard to any other aspects, we have been willing to cooperate, collaborate, open. All our doors are open. And now, not physically, we are working virtually also with any of your startups to collaborate and work from here itself. So good things are happening, and we have been always looking at United States, in many ways, in all the sectors, we have been working together. So we share a extremely more than governments. It has become more people to people. Even much more than the people relationship have built over the time. So the governments have been following the people. The kind of, even with the strategically the Quad also, the geopolitical strategy, are being the part of the Quad members, we have been working together with regard to various issues. So naturally, the relationship has grown over the time and it has become stronger. And similarly, we expect the more presence of United States institutions, more presence. And we have been working in many other, even educational institutions, universities, we have been working very closely. And we are trying to bring it much more closer with regard to exchange of students, with regard to the dual degrees, with regard to twinning, opening of campuses. In all possible areas, we are trying to bring closer to see a great future and to build a great relationship between US and India. With these few words, I would like to thank and it Bangalore Tech Summit, its People's Tech Summit, Technologies Summit, Innovators Summit, and its Industries Summit. We come here to just support, have a graceful presence, and to promote it. So, with these few words, I'll stop here and wish all of you all the best. Namaskara, Jai Hind, Jai Karnataka.
Ladies and gentlemen, during his keynote address, Honorable Minister mentioned about the qualitative work adopted in Karnataka. It gives me immense pleasure to share that under the able guidance of Honorable Minister Shri Ashwath Narayan sir, Karnataka retains its number one position as the most innovative state in the India Innovation Index 2020 by Niti Aayog. Thank you, sir. So now we are moving to the next part of the program. May I request the Honorable Minister to present a memento to Srimati Ambika Sharma and Consul General Jatin Ravan. I thank Mr. Sandeep Samadar, Strategic Head from USIBC. I request Mr. Sandeep Samadha, Strategic Head USIBC, to present a memento to our Honorable Minister. Thank you, sir, and thank you, ma'am, for accepting our honors. I thank the the dignitaries for the grand opening session and a successful opening session. A sincere thanks to Ms. Ambika Sharma, Managing Director, USIBC India, and Consul General, Ms. Judith Ravan, US Consul General Chennai, and Honorable Minister Dr. C. N. Ashwathanarayan for this wonderful opening session. Thank you, sir. I request the volunteers and the organizers to set chairs for the next panel discussion. I request the volunteers and the organizers to set the stage for the next panel discussion, please. He's not there. This session will be moderated by Mr. J. Galish, Executive Director, USIBC. May I request Mr. J. Galish to kindly come to the dais. The panelists will be Mr. Rajesh Kumar S., Head of Systems Engineering Enterprise and Government, Juniper Networks. Mr. Shantu Atos Alcantara, Senior Director, Government Affairs, LAM Research. Dr. Rohini Srivatsa, National Technology Officer, Microsoft. Kranchan, Head Strategy and Special Projects, Dhruva Space. So I request the panelists to kindly come to the dais. J. Galat leads digital media and committee and privacy working group. And Rajesh Kumar is the head of the systems engineering at Juniper Networks. Rajesh Kumar has been an integral part of the telecom and networking industry for the last 5 years. And Shan Lactos is the senior director and responsible for LAM strategic engagement with the US executive branch. And Dr. Rohini Srivastava, she is the National Technology Officer at the Microsoft India. And Kranti Chand heads the strategy and special products at Dhruva Space. Dhruva Space is full stack space engineering company and the first space technology startup in India. So may I now hand over the mic to Mr.
Great, thank you very much. Can everyone in the back hear us? Because we're going to be, okay, good. Can you just do some quick mic checks? Because those mics are going to be moving around a little bit. Yeah, got to turn that on.
Hello. This is a tech panel, and we're trying to figure out how to use the microwave.
Yeah.
Microphones. Most of us.
All right, great. So looks like the microphones are working. We're ready to go. Thank you all for coming today. Our opening session, and the Honorable Minister and Madam CG, you all both set the context for this conversation perfectly. You know, a lot of folks say, why are we here? And that is because the US-India relationship is, by size, scope, and depth, critical to both countries. The technology aspect of that, and both of you referenced it, is the core of the US-India partnership. There was tremendous reference on the commercial history, how many American companies are here, how Indians have studied in the United States, how Indian companies produce technology for America and Americans that help us be competitive in the world. And importantly, you talked about the future, not just the past. You know, we mentioned services and moving up to R&D and so forth, but then some real emerging technologies were referenced. Space technology, 5G communications, AI, IoT. So today's panel isn't looking at where we are now. It isn't looking where we came from. It's looking where we want to go. And the issue of education and academia and training was also central to our opening comments. And all of those really are the key elements of what we want to talk to you all today. And that is critical and emerging technologies in both the bilateral relationship between the United States and India, but also amongst our partners and allies around the world, within the Quad nations that include Japan and Australia, within the Indo-Pacific Economic Forum, and other partnerships around the world, where the United States and India are both digital powerhouses, but in our own unique way, that when we come together, it's truly synergistic. We need each other, but we also benefit from each other. And so as we talk about these new technologies, let me just sort of frame where we're coming from here. So if you look at the government-to-government conversations and look at what's really working well, it's the technology conversations. It's the national security agencies of the two countries looking at new technologies. but there's a real critical element, and we don't all have visibility into that, and that they're pulling in science and technology and academia and the national labs. There's some reference to the National Science Foundation of allocating new money. And this piece of the puzzle is somewhat new, but also super, super important, because industry works with governments and we work with academia, and we certainly work amongst ourselves. But now we have these three different pillars: government, academia, and industry working together, looking into these new technologies. So what are we talking about specifically? The two governments signed something called the Initiative for Critical and Emerging Technologies, ICET. We're going to be talking about that here and now, and you're going to be hearing about it from years to come. The ICET's looking at a handful of specific technologies: artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, 5 and 6G communications. It's looking at space technologies and quantum. And that's really, these are the technologies that are going to help our two countries not only prosper economically, but drive our security in the future. And it's also critical to know that the bilateral relationship, we're looking at these similar technologies, including the academic and utilization of the national labs in our partnerships within the Quad, and hopefully beyond in the Indo-Pacific Economic Forum. So let's just jump into this. First, we're going to have a little bit of a different format. We're going to have these rapid fire questions where we're going to ask each of our panelists to sort of move through questions rather quickly. And that's why I wanted to do the mic check. And also I wanted to start with quantum, because most of us don't really know what quantum is, but it's both a critical and emerging technology, but it's actually a family of technologies. And even for people like myself, the technologists, I don't even really know what it is and why it's important, but I know it is. So I'm going to start with you, Rohini, and you're a resident expert on quantum. And so, if I needed to explain quantum to my 11-year-old daughter, how would I explain it? It's over the horizon. Why is it important? What are the groups of technologies that we want to look at? And just sort of help us understand why quantum is so important. Over to you.
Sure, thanks very much. So quantum is the nature of physics at the very basic, fundamental, subatomic, atomic level. If you go down to the levels of particles in the subatomic, they are behaving in ways that are called quantum. So that means it's been there for as long as our universe has existed. It's always been there. The reason for interest in that fundamental phenomenon has been that because a lot of our computing technologies, which were following the semiconductor industry, which followed Moore's law, if you're familiar with that the amount of computation increases every 2 years, doubles every 2 years or 18 months. That is reaching a point where it can no longer sustain. Just the physics of devices, and I'm sure you'll talk about it, is reaching a point where it can no longer continue that acceleration. That is one of the reasons. But there are many other reasons why quantum is getting attention. Because at the fundamental physics level, the behavior of particles follows some rather quirky behaviors. In fact, Einstein called it, it's at least one of those behaviors, spooky action at a distance, which is called entanglement. Similarly, the way when you talk about each of your computers has got multiple thousands and millions of transistors, each transistor is manipulating something called a bit. A bit is a 0 or a 1, whereas a quantum state is both 0 and 1 at the same time. It's very difficult for most of us to even comprehend what that means. But it is those properties, quantum properties of entanglement, of superposition, of interference, are the very interesting physical properties that industries are starting to understand how to leverage and determine very, very useful use cases that current technologies cannot solve. That's the most important part. Current technologies cannot solve. Those fall in 3 or 4 buckets. Let me call it 4 buckets. One is computation, just quantum computing, because certain kind of problems require the kind of computation, etc., cannot be solved with today's computers. You have the potential of using quantum computing to solve those. Simulation. When we are looking at things like drug discovery, you want to be able to simulate molecules at a very, very fundamental level. That's another area which can be clubbed inside quantum computation. So computation and simulation, I'll combine them. Sensors. Quantum sensors can detect physical properties, even gravity, at a level that normal sensor cannot. And there are very interesting use cases. Third one is communications. Communications, secure communications. So there is a lot happening in terms of quantum key distribution and the ability to share, transmit data securely. And the last one is cryptography. There are fundamental reasons why the current cryptography will break when quantum computing becomes available at scale. How do you make sure that all the digital economy that is functional today remains functional, remains secure when quantum becomes real? So with that, I'll pause. There's a lot that's happening in this space, very, very exciting space. And I'm happy to see that the US and India are looking to collaborate in this realm.
Thank you. So it's safe to say that the countries or the companies that really are leading in quantum are going to be able to lead a lot of technologies in the future. Is that fair to say, whether it's encryption or communications or imaging?
I would say it's actually going to be not just the companies, but even economies and societies, because it is going to become at that level of relevance if I talk about the different technologies I was talking about. But this is looking a little bit further in the future.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're going to start our first rapid fire question here. And so the way this works is I'm going to ask each of our panelists for a quick response to sort of a challenging question, and we're going to see how it goes. So our first question here is, if you could tweet your thoughts on a key challenge or opportunity within the US-India technology space, what would it be? And Kranti, I'm going to pick on you. Here you go.
Well, she knows the answer right now. I think it's two issues, but it's interrelated. I think visas is the first one, especially for critical technologies which are listed as strategic and are not civilian, including space in this matter. And the second is the ITAR restrictions, which again do not enable us to communicate with each other. So I think those two I can give.
Is it on? Okay. I would say, no, when you said the ITAR, that's just made me think of that. Is it on? Oh, it is, but I'm not speaking closely enough to it. Sorry. I would say a couple of things, one of which is the skilling and the talent. There's no question that that is an advantage. And then trusted ecosystems. You're working in ecosystems where there is an element of transparency and trust in the bilateral relationship that is strategic and long-standing and makes a massive difference in terms of technology development.
From Juniper perspective, I think it's an opportunity because we started the company with 8 people in 2001. And today we have invested $1 billion and scaled up to 4,000 employees, doing a lot of innovations here in terms of artificial intelligence, the products, the solutions, what we offer. So that is the one which we are proud of in saying that, yes, we have built that ecosystem and we started offering solutions to government and collaborating with US in terms of what are those technologies the customers like education vertical or manufacturing or whatever they look at, how we can bring that to India and make it more productive in terms of the solutions what we can have.
I would say, I think the paradigm of hardware, software. So the US has been very strong in the world of hardware, and India is a software giant. So there are many places in systems that are complex where the two can be very complementary. I would say if we can crack that, we have a really powerful engine.
Great, thank you. Mine is I can't really tweet because it's hard to say a lot at 128 characters. I'm turning now to, I think, to Rajesh, over to you to talk about cyber and AI, please. So sort of to help us sort of frame this, right? You know, we've talked in our planning here. So what is really the transformational aspect of AI, right? Juniper's a networking company. Yeah, how is AI changing cyber, IoT, and networking? Over to you, sir.
Uh, Artificial intelligence, now it's becoming like a buzzword, what we have seen as a cloud adaptation or a cloud era, right? So when I look at AI from the network perspective, what happens is, if you look at users accessing the applications, it can be on cloud, there may be a hybrid culture, they may be accessing in data centers, there may be different ways their users access the applications, but the glue between users and applications is the network. That is transparent and opaque, which no one looks at it, right? But we have seen AI being used for different segments, for different their own requirements. What we are looking at is how we can bring AI and enhance the experience of the users, right? Once I say that, today, can you measure the experience of the users, not from the network perspective, from the user perspective, right? How can I measure the experience of the user? What is that parameters I can look at, right? The second is, how can I do faster resolution of the issues? How can I pinpoint where the issue is and resolve this faster before the user comes to know about it? All this leads to AI, right? Because artificial intelligence gives you the deep visibility into the network, understands the historical data, and analyzes with the real-time data. And then the algorithms are used in terms of data mining, right? And then domain-specific chunks have been put into the data science to come out with actionable insights which are on real-time basis. So that gives a lot of effect in terms of how we can enhance the experience of the users, how we can resolve the issues much faster. And coming to cyber, this is at a high level what AI can do for the networks today. That is what the customers are looking. Because today, customers are looking at minimum skill set what they have, but how they can enable this by using AI and make it possible. How can I reduce my tickets? How can I improve my performance? How can I enhance the experience? How can I keep up the uptime? All this comes under AI as an umbrella, right? That is the first point. Second, cyber. When you talk about cyber and IoT, today IoT is becoming a big factor. When we are looking at 5G, when we are looking at manufacturing, when we are looking at healthcare, you take any segments. Today, IIoT or OT or IoT, whatever you call it, is becoming a predominant place to play that in the network perspective. So when you look at thousands of IoTs coming into play, then the problem comes is the overarching security, the cyber security, what we talk about, right? So what I want to say is that when you look at that, then the network and the security should have the balance. Secondly, it not to be that I build a big network and I don't have a security parameters properly laid across, or I have a big security but I don't have a network to do that performance. That is the first point. The second point is how I can, today there is no perimeter in cyber security. Every endpoint is vulnerable in terms of any kind of applications you access, any kind of device you bring in, or any kind of user getting into the network. That is the key. That is very, very difficult to manage. And also IoTs are old. They don't do security patches. They may be coming into the network where the IT team cannot be able to manage that IoTs, right? So at that particular point of time, the best way to do it is to have a threat mechanism which is proactive, and it can provide you the capabilities of profiling the devices. That means I say we can profile the devices, and then we can apply, enforce the policy on real-time basis, and as well as do a risk profiling. That means if this IoT is 10 years old, it doesn't have any security patches, then I risk it at a higher level than the IoT which has come is a new device which has a very low risk profile. Risking the risk profile of the devices, users, applications, and then actually using it in terms of reducing the blast radius of the compromised devices in a whole network, and then also identifying the devices in the network, right? All this, if I put together, then the cyber network security AI all plays a role here, because AI continuously monitors the historical data with the real-time analysis and tells you exactly where the devices are compromised, where those locations of the devices have been compromised, how I can enforce the policies, how can I reduce that area so that the rest of the network is active without any threats. These are the things at a high level where cyber, AI, everything is put in place. And there are a lot of things happening in that, in terms of NLP coming in play, right? Natural language process. And if they ask how is my network today, it will give you exactly how is your network today. using AI. How is Rajesh doing today? It will tell you exactly how is Rajesh doing today. Whether his coverage is good, whether he's got a good access to applications, or he's been compromised, or he's gone and accessed any malware site, right? This is the way the AI is going to play in the network scenario. I just wanted to highlight some of the few examples.
Thank you. You're hired, by the way. If anyone needs networking, Juniper Networks. That was really, really great. Simplified some complex issues there. So thank you. Are you ready, Rajesh, for your rapid fire question? Okay, great. So the minister referenced this, and he said a lot of Indians often look to the United States for educational opportunities. They look internationally for what's going on. And I think it's fair to say that Indians often look at international benchmarks. What's going on and what can we replicate it? But you look around Bangalore and elsewhere, there's a lot of really cool stuff going on here. So if you could identify what is one of the Indian activities or technologies that's going on that really could or should be an international benchmark.
International benchmark in terms of Indian activities, I can talk about one of the things in, again, coming back to the AI and the IoT, because IT-OT convergence is happening in a big way in India. And if you look at the IT-OT convergence happening, there is a lot of things happening in IT-OT convergence, because the manufacturing, they were used to use earlier different networks for OT and different networks for IT. But today, I tell you 3 things which are happening in manufacturing for IT-OT convergence. We call it as 3 Vs, right? Volume, velocity, and variety. These are the 3 things which are really manufacturing vertical is facing a lot of problems in addressing these 3 Vs. Volume, because there is a lot of billions of connections happening because of the billions of IoTs coming into play, right? And actually the varieties, because there is different kind of IoTs for different segments what they want to use, right? And then actually the other thing is the capabilities of the IoTs to have a lot of security threats coming into play. So if you look at that, then the capabilities what we are bringing in terms of innovations in India to address those solutions in terms of how we can converge IT-OT, how we can bring the cyber security place, and all address actions and the experience what the manufacturing unit has. They want to go deep down, like it can be, there are a lot of robotics which roam inside the manufacturing units. The roaming capabilities, what they want. They want the geofencing capabilities. They want to do asset tracking capabilities. They want to have a lot of OT which needs to be actually know exactly how is their behavioral characters. They are headless. So any issue, that how do I actually recognize that OT and bring down that particular portion of the network back to you, right? So there are a lot of things happening. So what I feel is that when I talk to our counterpart in the US,
please.
yeah, when I talk to the counterpart of US, that we feel that they are talking to us in terms of understanding more on this IT-OT convergence.
Thank you.
That is where I see that we are heading in terms of innovation in IT-OT convergence.
Chantal, over to you.
Okay, mine's not going to be that technical. One of the things that I think is a great strength is the Indian government support for entrepreneurs. I mean, that's what Dr. Narayana just talked about. It is startups, entrepreneurs, the sheer number of startups. That support is what fuels innovation. It's what fuels new technologies. You know, that's a great opportunity to look at that and how they accomplish that.
Thank you. Rainey, over to you.
I think one really outstanding innovation that's happening in India is the public digital platforms, which are happening at a population scale that couldn't have been imagined. So if you just look at the price tag at which you can make a payment and pay the chai wala on a corner thing with the kind of ease with a mobile phone, it's actually a point of envy for a lot of countries around the world.
Well, I think Rohini stole my words, but the Digital India open data policy, I think if Rajesh spoke about AI, it needs the data sets that precede, right? And I think open data policy made that available, again, at a global scale, because India by itself has that population.
Thank you. Mine is Smart Tag. India has an RFID built into the windshield that lets you pay tolls, but also will be critical to smart cities. In the United States, you can't go more than 2 states without having to whip out the credit card or find some cash to pay a toll. All right, Chantal, over to you. You know, semiconductors is arguably one of the hottest issues that people have been talking about. It's on everyone's agenda, it's on everyone's talking points, and we're trying to ensure that there are enough chips that we can propel the digital economy going forward. Maybe you can just share some insights. How do we decipher this issue? You know, why are people talking about supply chains? What do we mean by supply chains? And, you know, how does the chip sector really work?
Okay, how
Easy
long is this
easy
panel?
question. 3 days.
Okay, it's the 3-day panel of what is the semiconductor chip industry. So the short answer, so let me start with a couple of things. The first thing is to know about the semiconductor industry. So my company is one segment of the semiconductor industry. We are wafer fabrication equipment suppliers. So we make the tools that make the chips. Our customers are the fabs, Intel, Samsung, et cetera. So no one country, no one company, no one fab can sustain the whole of the semiconductor ecosystem. It is incredibly complex. It is geographically dispersed. And when you look at the semiconductor supply chain, which is what everybody talks about, right? Everybody wants to talk about semiconductors because they're essential for our everyday life. They are critical for military and so forth, but they're also in many ways the enablers or the DNA for some of these critical and emerging technologies that we're all talking about on this panel. So they are an economic and a national security issue, rightly so. Countries are thinking about various incentive programs at how to support those industries domestically, because access to those chips and those technologies is what fuels economies and also covers national security issues. So having said that, one of the things when I think about the pandemic, and the Consul General talked about not being here the first 2 iterations of her tenure here at this event, is the pandemic exposed massive vulnerabilities in the semiconductor supply chain, vulnerabilities that perhaps weren't thought about before, but we all witnessed and in some ways probably experienced the shortage, the chip shortage. And we looked at that as a government. The US government put out the 100-day supply chain report, which broke down each segment of the semiconductor industry and looked at where those vulnerabilities were. And those vulnerabilities could be caused by, as the pandemic did, disruption in orders, natural disasters, fires, droughts, shifting in demand, sudden shift in demand, which was in some ways the result of the pandemic. And when we looked at that, when the US government looked at that, they put out that report, and what they talked about, they had lots of different, sort of solutions, but what they looked at is look to your allies and partners. Look at where you can collaborate. Look at where you can leverage your comparable advantages. And when you think about the Quad, when you think about our strategic relationship with India, those things come to mind. We talked about skilling up. Where are their skills? Where can we look at those vulnerabilities where one country may not have specific capabilities, where another ally has those capabilities? In R&D and research and development, where can we look to identify those gaps and fill those gaps? Places like the ISAT, the Quad, the IPEF, the Indo-Pacific Economic Forum. I can't believe I said that acronym correctly. There are so many venues for us. Now with the CHIPS Act, we have the NSTC, which is the National Semiconductor Technology Center, where academia, industry, government, the national labs can all come together with allies and partners to do critical research and do innovation and stay ahead of the leading edge, leveraging those strategic partnerships and relationships that we have with India, and win the Quad with Japan and Australia. So I didn't explain the entire semiconductor ecosystem, but as ecosystems grow and develop, which they will continue to do, and the supply chain that fuels that and fuels these critical technologies, these partnerships will become more and more important because, like I said in the beginning, no one country, no one company can sustain the entire supply chain and ecosystem.
Yeah, please.
Just a couple of comments to add to what you said, because
Absolutely.
I began my career in the semiconductor industry in about 30 years ago. The US had many fabs in the early part of the geometries, right? I mean, even going to nanometer levels. But then I think the scale and the cost of these fabs became such that it became more and more consolidated. But I think it's a good thing now that beyond the very high end of the fabs, US is looking at. Same thing India needs to. But in terms of the collaborations, it's actually not even new. The collaboration on the electronic design automation tools, on just design for testing, many of those areas has been happening. In fact, when I was doing my PhD, this was early 90s, my partner group was here in Bangalore. At that time, working for Texas Instruments, right? So there is a long history of partnership in the semiconductor world between the US and India that hopefully will keep in the different level.
I mean, it's been here for over 20 years. So it has been happening. Absolutely. There's no question about that. And what we are looking towards is filling out those ecosystems everywhere. And that partnership can help also prevent supply chain disruptions in the future as well.
Great, thank you. So you ready for your rapid fire question? Been really useful. So we'll start with chips.
Well, I already mentioned mine, which was the NSTC, which I think is fantastic. I think we need to get back to some of that collaboration between industry, our partners, academia, government, bringing all those stakeholders together to really just collaborate and innovate at the top level.
Right, and that's just a center of excellence on
National Semiconductor Technology Center.
Okay, and so they'll do sort of advanced research
Yes.
with multiple stakeholders and really sort of invest in the future of
Yes.
the technology. Great. Rajesh, over to you. Rapid fire question from your point of view, an incentive that's really just sort of worked.
Which one?
An incentive, a program that's really worked to really move issues forward.
It's in the issues forward from what perspective? Like
From your perspective.
so, when you look at the innovations, what we are doing here, the way we have taken it forward in terms of addressing some of the critical projects, what we are addressing today, like maybe one of the things.
Fiber or something?
Pardon?
Like fiber optics and some of the.
Yeah, exactly. So I just wanted to touch upon that in terms of when we are looking at today, the National Optical Fiber Network, where the fiber is going to the villages and enabling e-services for the villages. That is amazing to see, because they are getting the e-education services, e-health services, whatever the e-services, what we were looking at is reaching the villages, reaching the rural areas today, right? So that is the key, what I see, that one of the key things, and we are very much in terms of participating in that project. And we have done a couple of states with this kind of fiber optic projects where we have enabled the rural areas to have this kind of facilities which were not available to them today, right? That is amazing to see. And I could say that in the first question when you asked, this can be one of the things which US can look at, because the scale what we are doing it, that is very important. And the services what we are offering to thousands and thousands of citizens, it can be G2G, G2B, G2C, you call it any names, like it can be government to citizen, all that kind of transactions which are happening today, right? As Honorable Minister said, that Metaverse, of electrical vehicles being used in rural areas to sell electrical vehicles is one of the key things where this optical fiber network is able to reach and give that kind of bandwidth and give that kind of access to those rural areas, right? There are a lot of things. See, you look at the fisherman's case studies, you look at ITC doing the food case studies, all that are leading to because of the kind of projects which are coming up in India. And one of the other projects I just wanted to say 2 minutes is the connectivity of the universities and academia and education across India, across the globe. That is becoming one of the big projects where every university, every educational academia, every research, every defense across India and across the globe are getting connected together today, right? So that is the initiative taken from India in terms of known as National Knowledge Network, right? So that is what one of the knowledge which academia can be going through across. So these are some of the key initiatives which I wanted to just highlight.
Rohini, from your point of view, an incentive that sort of is valuable to help stimulate market segment or technology?
I think one of the places that the Indian government is doing on the skilling side. So there is an initiative called Future Skills, if you're familiar. Future Skills is about skilling that is a partnership between the government, many industry bodies, private sector, university, etc. And I think it's a great way of the government being an enabler of skilling people for future technologies. And one of the things that Microsoft has been doing in partnership in there is to have programs that connect not just skilling, but skilling to employability, skilling to jobs, because that becomes a challenge if you don't close that loop. And one of the things we are doing that is by making sure that certain programs are part of a university's curriculum. So if somebody does that program, it is counted towards your degree, your grades, your credits, etc. Right? And then that what that work you do in that is published on GitHub as something for anybody to see. So that closes some of that enabling is quite remarkable.
Well, thank you. Kranti, your rapid fire question, an incentive that's really just driven technology?
I think the public procurement where we put in Make in India, I think that made a big change, because when you have supply chain issues, you can set up your plant anywhere in the world, right? The reason why many other companies are coming down to India to set up is because that enables them to qualify under Make in India and supply from India, and at the same time utilize the ecosystem to also provide the supply chain ecosystem across the world. So I think Make in India, I think, made more investments come in into those sectors which we had lacked technology, and I think that's a critical one.
Great, thank you, thank you. So Kranti, you can hold on to the mic because I'm coming to you. We're moving to a sector that's just near and dear to my heart. Why is space so strategic? And can you share your experience as a startup about how India's changing sector of commercial space and focus on entrepreneurship? You know, how has that really helped you sort of move forward, and then link that back to why space is both a critical and an emerging technology?
Well, I think the start of it, right? When we talk of space, everyone thinks of two things. One is aliens. The second one is who's watching me from which satellite. You know, I think the fear, you know, that drives us, also created a path for innovation. Space has been something that was something that inspired the STEM education in certain ways. Taken part into, you know, I think the beautiful movie August Rush, October Sky. So I think how universities and students from colleges got inspired to do bigger things. You know, every time I grew up, you know, some people used to say, it's not rocket science. Why couldn't you do it? Now, rocket science was a challenge that people needed. And I think that was what space brought in as a change into minds of people. Now, when you look at space and what it is doing to us, we've moved away from what surveillance happens, but our phone GPS is what connects us. You know, we are able to move from one point to the other without asking any questions. We have backup communication networks which run on the satellite network. You know, 5G to 4G or 2G itself. You know, the backhaul is done through satellites. So the communication increased, and the intelligence on Earth. At the end of the day, um, once upon a time, I used to think, oh, Antarctica, it's too far away. But for India, it is not. For America, it is not, because we've set up a base in Antarctica where we are booming signals using antennas in Antarctica to receive the data from satellites for what? The scientific expeditions that we do, ensuring that the Earth and the global warming issues, or how the whole green cover and the blue cover is changing. I think we are using satellites to the utmost possible, and we are exploring new ways to do it. So that makes it strategic, because we are understanding Earth in a very different way and providing the people on Earth a more information and data to take corrective measures, not just in our lives in terms of how we communicate with each other, but also how we as a human race evolve and move towards even the potential for deep space missions.
Thank you. So you touched upon it in your rapid fire question. I'll let you begin. Is you can't have a technology conversation without talking about sustainability and climate. From your sector or perspective, what is the biggest single challenge or issue on sustainability, and how does your sector help solve it?
Well, I think it's more than one. It's a real hard one to say. And I think we do methane gas emission monitoring, we do heat emission monitoring, carbon footprint monitoring from space, which gives us a picture of where what is happening. And I think that changes the way how we react to things. But at the same time, as industry, we are forced to launch a lot more satellites to cover the whole Earth, to be reactive on a very short-term basis, right? And the cycle has to happen. Now we are using also a lot of rare earth minerals and metals into our own production. So where do we draw that sustainability line? You know, our supply chain is going to be critical on those rare earth metals that are to be used, but that infrastructure that needs to be developed so that we again protect the earth back. I think that's the biggest point that the ecosystem is working on, which is how do you balance creation of infrastructure for sustainability while not depleting the resources ourselves in the endeavor to do sustainability.
It's a big challenge. Brittany, over to you. Sustainability.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge in sustainability today is data. Because we are all making a lot of promises about reaching net zero or whatever, carbon positive, etc. But the ability to measure how far along we are in that journey is a big challenge. And in that, I think, to me, actually, one of the biggest promises of the space industry is being able to even provide honest, real data to measure how far we are. Just an example, if you look at if you ask a question as to how much of renewable data, renewable energy sources are even out there, you won't have reliable data. How do you get that to be able to even optimize how far you are along the path of becoming renewable energy dependent? That's where in one use case where space technology comes in. So I think it is just the ability to measure, and you get done what you measure. You get done only what you measure.
Chantal, over to you, please.
I don't know if I can follow those two up. I really do agree, though, with what Kranti said about that balance and measuring, especially in the industries that we are in, where we do use rare earths and we do make commitments to net zero, which we have done. But it really is that balancing act, and you're doing recycling of the clean water, and you're doing all the things, but you need to measure it, you need to balance. And so I'm sort of going to echo what they both said.
Great. Rajesh, over to you.
The sustainability, yes, the carbon, what they spoke about, I actually say that. And then also from our perspective, sustainability will be more from the power space, because when you build a huge network, the power becomes very critical for them. And the other one is the traffic optimization sustainability, because today, when you have a lot of IoTs, 5G content coming close to the users, then how do you optimize that and reduce the connections over the networks and build that kind of sustainability across is what is critical for us.
Thank you. Dr. Srivastava, and I'm using the doctor now because we're going to academia. There has been a lot of talk about academia. It's important in this whole critical and emerging technology space. Clearly, the United States and India have a strong partnership in academia. India is also looking to reform a lot of the ways it does its academia, and particularly its science and technology research. What can you share? What's going on? What does India need to do to become a world-class research, academic research and development hub, just as they are currently in the commercial realm?
Yeah, that's a very, very important question and quite close to my heart. If you look at the number of graduates and even the very best talent that India creates, that go to the US and lead the largest of companies, you would wonder, why is that not happening in India or happening at the same scale? And it should. Because the talent is there, the kind of academic rigor is there, the STEM focus is there, all of that is there. The focus from the government on R&D investment is also there. In fact, I serve on the Scientific Advisory Committee for a national mission on cyber physical systems. Is a mouthful, but anyway. But the point being that it's got 25 innovation hubs in the country across at all the top institutions. Where I'm seeing a gap, which really India should learn from the US and other countries, is the mixing of industry and academia, to be able to bring in real use cases that the academicians are working on. And that I see, having worked in the US and studied in the US, they've really figured it out. The amount of collaborations in the semiconductor world long time back at UT Austin I was doing was just phenomenal. You were in the university, but you were learning what the real challenges out there were at the IBMs and the Intels of the world. So I think there are few keys to be opened that the country India could learn from US, and in return, there's a lot of theoretical background depth in India. Whether you look at quantum or you look at statistics, etc., there's some really deep theoretical work that's happening. So there's a lot of synergy in being able to unlock some of those capabilities and innovations that one thinks on theoretically should be happening, but are not yet happening at the scale at which they need to.
Thank you. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I think it's not just about India, but most of the developing countries. We are chasing the economic goals of employment, salary generation, wealth creation. That at some point we have to go back to the basics. And I think math, chem, physics, biology, going back to the very basics and providing opportunities for core research in sciences more than the technology should also be a part, because I think that's something that is moving away from the education field. I think that's also a critical one we have to.
Great, thanks. And I would add endowments. American universities have tremendous endowments. I encourage Indian universities to do the same. And then academic commercial entities. You see a lot of academic spin-offs in the United States. So a professor is also a CEO or a startup.
Some of that is happening at the IITs. Madras is good, Mumbai is good, but the scale, the Pitt, Pilani, some of these are happening, but it needs to happen a lot more.
Great. Well, I'm getting the guillotine sign, so I want to do our last rapid fire question. Rajesh, I'm going to start with you. If you had to select your favorite science fiction book, movie, or TV series, what is it?
Science fiction. That's like.
All right, I think we have the answer. Over to you, Chantal. Not a sci-fi guy.
Blade Runner, the original.
I'm a diehard Star Trek fan. And the other one, yeah, I just live by it. And of course, the 2000 Space Odyssey. That is the classic.
Yeah, I think again, Rohini takes the lead. I I think a lot of people grew up on Star Wars, but I think Star Trek pushed the boundaries for a lot of us in terms of not being just a pilot, but being a pilot of a spacecraft and driving to the faraway galaxies.
We're a Stargate family. Wormhole physics are really tremendous, and the potential is outrageous to bring home alien technologies. But ending on a lighter note, let's end on a serious note. This panel was incredibly informative. I want to thank you all. We hopefully brought forth why these technologies are critical in their own right for not only humanity, but economics, but for the relationship. And I think United States and India were uniquely positioned to really drive forward. And so I want to thank you each and for your comments and really appreciate your time. So can we give them a warm round of applause? Thank you very much. And I'll hand it over to the MC. Thank you again. I'm going to give you guys bravo.
To you.
Thank you, sir. I thank the moderator and all the panelists for making this discussion very informative and very active. Thank you, sir. Thank you once again. So, ladies and gentlemen, now we are going to listen to the keynote address by a passionate entrepreneur, Mr. Manoj Agarwal, co-founder XOXOD. So, he's going to present a keynote address on tech growth drivers in a diminishing return economy. I request Mr. Manoj Agarwal to kindly come to the dais. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome Mr. Manoj Agarwal for the keynote address. Mr. Manoj Agarwal is a passionate entrepreneur who co-founded XOXOD, a fintech disruptor who has recently secured $30 billion funding to expand its reach to the global reward, incentives, and loyalty industry.
Around innovation. But let me take you through some different perspective on innovation, very different from what we have been hearing in the last 2 days. So we are living in a very fast-paced technology world. A lot of great things happening. In every session, we hear something very unique and how technology is kind of enabling a lot of innovation and a lot of new things and a lot of solutions for the global world. Now, what is also happening is that as we are moving further and further into innovation and technology, the marginal utility of the new features or any new product is coming down and down. So today, if we talk about any innovation, by the time that innovation gets settled, people are asking for more. People are asking for something new, and that's why businesses as well as the consumers, they are getting very less time to even settle down with one technology or one innovation. And that is a global issue which is a very different take on innovation, that yes, there is innovation required on one side, but on the other side, if there is too rapid innovation, how it can unsettle things. And that is what we are facing globally. Sorry. I think this is not working. The marginal utility of a lot of technology products are decreasing, and I'll show you a classic example of this. If you can go to the next slide, please. Yeah. So we all know about this, that iPhone launched with a phone, and that was such a great innovation across the world. Now, with every passing year, uh, iPhone has to stay relevant, and they are really pushing themselves hard to innovate. But are they really able to innovate to the level they started the innovation with? Actually, no. So it's a struggle on both the sides. Consumers are asking for innovation, but companies are then struck that, okay, where do I innovate? Because uh, there is a limit for innovation, and there are cases where you are actually in that mode of innovation, trying to position yourself as an innovative company, and then you end up doing a metaverse. Now, are consumers really looking for the likes of metaverse? The answer, we all know the answer. So, can technology companies listen more to the consumers and then try to develop solutions which are consumer centric, which are the real needs, which are the real demand, and then solving some real problems? The world of softwares was great before. I mean, before 2000, it was a merry-go-round for everyone. Uh, it was a very seller-driven market. The IBMs of the world just controlling the market, just one player or few players controlling the market. The entry barriers were very high for incumbents. Today, we see a startup maybe every 1 hour. But you talk about those days where it was just one company in maybe 5 years. And because of that, there was very high differentiation in the mindset of consumer. So consumer could actually differentiate product number A with product number B, which is kind of becoming very same today. The number of users were very few, and they used to talk about it. So the early users of the handset, I think the Nokia and those kind of handset, they used to be extremely proud about owning that handset because they were the elite few to own those things. But today it is commoditized. I mean, everyone owns technology, everyone kind of uses technology. So it's rapid commoditization of technology. And the total cost of ownership in those days was much higher, making it even tougher for people to kind of make it a mass market. Now, if we talk about the software and SaaS world today, it's a buyer-driven market. Sellers really are on the edge, and the buyers, we all know buyers are demanding, and then that's why it's a vicious circle for sellers to kind of keep innovating, but at the same time, don't end up doing something which is not really required. Extremely low entry barriers for incumbents to start. Everything is on the cloud. Everything is open source, so it's very easy to get started. And the third, which is the biggest problem, is the sameness in product. So if you talk about, I'm talking about the SaaS world or the software world. If we talk about the CRM industry or the HRMS industry or these sort of industries, there are hundreds and thousands of players, but all look almost the same. So it becomes very complex for the decision makers that which one to buy because all look the same. The number of users are becoming large, and that is making it increasingly commoditized. And the total cost of ownership for people to adopt and buy any technology is extremely low today. Now, in such a scenario, what should businesses do? What should SaaS companies and software companies do? Because there is definitely a big problem. So there are two ways of looking at it. One is you keep innovating and just be in that robotic wheel that, okay, I will innovate even if my customer is not demanding that innovation. The second way of looking at it is that let's keep it simple. And sometimes simplest problems are the hardest to solve. So can we keep things simple and just solve problems which the customers are looking for, and then use some other vehicles for growth? Because a lot of companies are innovating not for the sake of user, but they are innovating for the sake of growth. So can they grow not only by innovation but by a lot of other things which are much easier? And these are some of the learnings which we had during our journey into running this company, And I'll just share 4 examples of those which are very simple things. A lot of people might already know that, but they work very well. The first is democratize the reach and ownership of any product which you are building. So in the earlier world, everyone used to have this mindset that, okay, I'm making a B2B enterprise product, and the ownership was only limited to that. After a few decades, it came towards SMB, that, okay, let the SMBs also start adopting these products, and I'll build it for SMBs. But today, when you see the world, it is actually the end user. And then we have different terms to these end users, which is or B2C. So within your product stack, your technology stack, rather than just building for one enterprise B2B use case, can you have the mix which directly reaches to the consumer, because then you own the consumer. The second one is SaaS plus commerce. That a lot of companies just rely on SaaS, which is the software value and the software income. But because of rapid sameness of products and commoditization, it becomes very tough for these companies to really get additional revenue year on year only in SaaS. Because the customer who was buying for X price yesterday is asking for maybe X by 2 price today, because there is somebody else who is giving at that price. So how do you keep your revenue engine growing in such cases is add a commerce within your SaaS. So there is a great article by A to Z, Anderson Horowitz, which says that at the end of the day, every business is a fintech business. And you can always have some financial component in any product. I'm talking about software products here, not talking about hardware. So try to inculcate some kind of a commerce element into products, and this gives you a multi-channel revenue strategy. And even if your SaaS values are going down, you actually have a commerce which is directly reaching to the customers. This is how we do it. There is SaaS, there is a lot of commerce in our products. The third one is the integration flywheel. That how do you make your products so very easy and seamless that you are able to allow your users to use them in the flow of work. So today, because of too many products out there, how can multiple products talk to each other seamlessly so that users feel like a very frictionless experience going from one product to another product and have a fantastic experience? And this is another strategy which has worked very well for us as a company, and we integrate heavily with multiple products, whether you want to use our product through an HRMS from a Microsoft Teams or a Slack or a CRM and so on. And then that opens, that makes it easy for the end users, as well as it makes it extremely great for us in our go-to-market, because we are able to piggyback on multiple integrations and grow together with them. And the fourth is self-serve products, which is again something which is happening for the last 5 to 10 years. Most of the products in the earlier few decades were very close. I mean, even to get a demo product, you have to really wait for a couple of days. You have to talk to a sales guy and so on. So very high friction. But today, you make your product so very easy that you can get started just like opening your account in a Google, in a Gmail. So in the scheme of your products, can you build self-serve and do it yourself as part of the product strategy? And that gives immediate value to the users, and then they get started. And then this is the final note that most of the businesses try to classify the end user as a B2B or a B2B2C or a B2C or a D2C, etc., etc. But we are all users. I you. I mean, we are all humans and we are all users. So let's try to build products which are more human to human, which are more simple and addressing some real needs of the users. And then you don't end up doing some moonshots projects which go nowhere, just burning the money. Those are not required. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir Manoj Agarwal, for your informative keynote address. So now let's move on to the next panel discussion. The topic of the next panel discussion will be the reality of Metaverse, commerce, ethics, security, and safety. Mr. Deep Srihari, Vice President and Senior Policy Counsel at Access Partnership, will be the moderator of this panel discussion. I welcome Mr. Dilip Srihari. For this panel discussion to moderate, and the panelists will be Mr. Girish Menon, Chief Strategy Officer, Jet Synthesis, Mr. Sunil Abraham, Public Policy Director, Data Economy and Engineering Technologies, Meta, and Mr. Kamal Datta, CEO, ByteEdge, Dr. Subhasis Sen Gupta, Managing Director, Accenture Technology Labs and Head of Technology Innovation for Growth Markets, and Ms. Uttara Ganesh, Head of Public Policy, Snapping. I request all the panelists to kindly come to the dais. Mr. Dilip Srihari is a Senior Policy Counsel in Access Partnerships, Washington, D.C. office. He focuses on data policy, cyber security, and techno-communications infrastructure issues. Mr. Girish Menon is the Chief Strategy Officer at Jet Synthesis, one of India's most innovative companies in the gaming, esports, and digital entertainment companies. Ms. Uttara Ganesh is the Head of Public Policy South Asia at Snapping. Mr. Kamal Datta is a co-founder and CEO of ByteEdge, a new age enterprise learning company headquartered in Singapore. Mr. Sunil Abraham is a Public Policy Director, Data Economy and Emerging Technologies, Meta. And Dr. Subhasis Sen Gupta, his area of specialization is around large-scale distributed systems and software engineering and all based and systems. So I request Mr. Dilip to conduct the discussion. So go ahead with the discussion. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. Again, I'm Dilip Srihari. I'm with Access Partnership, a global tech policy consulting firm. I'm actually visiting India from our Washington, D.C. office, and we have a panel that has, I think, 3 folks from American companies and 2 folks from Indian companies. So it's a nice representation for a US IBC panel. So rather than me talking a lot, I won't want to hear from our panelists. So I just thought we'd sort of start by kind of going down the line and asking each of you to maybe spend a minute or two describing, since we're talking about the metaverse, maybe what is the metaverse? What does that mean to you? And what is your company's sort of role in the metaverse? So I thought we'd maybe start actually with Sunil from Meta, because when we're talking about metaverse and your company is named Meta, it seemed like that's a reasonable place to start. Sunil.
Thanks so much, Dilip. The way I'd like to explain the metaverse is to take us back in history. The year is 1969. And the academics and technologists that built the ARPANET network sent the first message across that network, and suddenly geography becomes history. It no longer matters where you are on the planet. You have the power of instant communication. Then over the 90s and the 2000s, both mobile phones and social media becomes incredibly popular. And then history becomes history. It's no longer the monopoly of historians to tell us what happened. Everyday people with their mobile phones are able to document and produce history collectively. And today we are at a very particular and interesting moment in time where like Meta are trying to make physics history. If you look at AR, VR, and XR technologies broadly, what happens, at least the illusion is that laws of physics are broken in what you see and experience. And perhaps the most powerful application is bringing people together, which is a central mission for Meta. And I think it is exciting precisely because it is sustainable. Today, to have that very same experience, we burn a lot of jet fuel to spend time together with one another. That will no longer be the case once metaverse technologies are mature.
Thanks, Sunil. When folks think about metaverse, one of the first things they think about is gaming. So, Girish, maybe you can tell us a little bit about what Jet Synthesis is doing on the metaverse.
No, thanks, Dilip. I think being asked to define the metaverse is very tricky because I think maybe there are probably 100 definitions out there. And every time I try to define it, I probably end up saying something different, right? So, it's partly the more you know, the more you learn. And also the fact that this is still evolving. But I would look at it in two ways: what it is and what it isn't, right? In a very, very simple sense, the way I look at it is fundamentally a way for users to engage with themselves and with others and with brands in virtual environments, right? Which are far more immersive than what you would traditionally see in a typical app or a web-based model, right? You can go more complex than that when you start adding commerce to it, start adding a whole economy to it, whether that's blockchain based or not, right? But essentially, at the simplest level, that's how I think about it. At the same time, and this comes from our gaming experience, because for us, in a lot of ways, every game is a virtual experience, an immersive experience where you're actually playing within something, right? And most metaverses in some form or the other, have evolved from gaming, already present in games in different forms, right? That's the concept. What it isn't, or rather what it isn't only, is VR and AR. And the reason I say that is VR, AR are ways to access and experience the metaverse, but they are not the metaverse in that sense, right? So, and I think that's a very important distinction, because different organizations will pursue different ways for consumers to engage with the metaverse, but there is really no one right answer. And both for demographics, countries, geographies, how you need to position that access will differ. So I think that's another important thing to sort of keep in mind.
Thanks, Girish. Uttara, I know you have some thoughts on AR and VR. Maybe you can define those terms for us and tell us what the difference is between those and how that affects how Snap views the world of the metaverse.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Dilip, for having me. So regardless of what you want to call it, I think it's important and interesting to talk about the future of immersive computing. At Snapchat, we're exclusively focused on AR, augmented reality. And what I specifically mean by that is that we're using technological computational overlays, right? Text-based, audio-based, video-based, on the real world to enhance it, right? So we're not talking about the creation of an alternate tech-based universe in a sense that people would interact in. And this was a very intentional, deliberate thing that the company did, right? About focusing exclusively on AR. Because our goal really was to try and make the technology as ubiquitous as possible. And the way to do that really was to identify use cases that are off the real world, right? So really, the lowest hanging fruit at the time that we started off was visual communication, right? Transforming the drab and dry world of text messaging to make it as visual and immersive as possible. So you guys will recall maybe from your children or nephews and nieces that there was a sense of that the iconic sort of vomiting rainbow was a thing, the bunny ears were a thing 6 or 7 years ago. And, like over the years, we've achieved tremendous scale. At the moment on Snapchat, there are 250 million people who use and interact with AR every day, and of which there are 60 billion instances of the use of AR already, right, on the application. And the reason, I'm bringing this up is because, like as we've sort of scaled, we've also sort of seen a shift from play to utility, right? So what's happened now, and we also made a small thing in 2018 where our secret sauce, the camera, the Snap camera kit, we sort of allowed for that to be evangelized, right? So any developer today can use the Snap camera kit and integrate that into their own iOS or Android-based application. And what that actually did for us, why would we do that? Because it's a win-win, right? What that did was that it allowed for the use cases to proliferate, right? So today, actually, what we've noticed that Snap AR and Snap ML basically powers a variety of use cases, including like experiential tourism, healthcare, and education. And those actually are now some of the best users of the technology, as opposed to just the communications thing that started off as a playful, accessible starting point for us. So I'll pause there and thank you.
Thanks, Sita. And sort of as we transition from gaming towards socializing towards more productive, or I shouldn't say productive, but more of metaverse technology. One of them is related to learning and training. And so, Kamal, maybe you can provide us some perspective on that.
Yeah. So thanks. And I think, learning is no longer a serious business. It should include gaming, social media, and all of that. And it does. But that apart, I think when we were kids, we used to, English was not my first language, not even my second language, actually. And one of my professors used to say, talk English, think in English, and if possible, dream in English, right? Imagine the potential of Metaverse to finally make it realize, where I can actually dream in English. Let's consider a sample case of Raj. You must have heard the name before, right? Very popular name. Let's say he is struggling with his communication skills, and that is limiting his career growth. Metaverse gives him the opportunity to not only, there are a lot of language and communication apps nowadays, but he has the potential now to live an alternative reality where he socializes, eats, makes friends, chats, plays, engages. All of this is within English in an alternate world. And to me, that kind of learning that he's getting from those interactions is transformative. And I think that's what holds the promise of Metaverse in education. In a very use case example.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And, of course, just beyond the cases that we've talked about, the metaverse will also be important, for corporations and business alike. And a company that knows something about supporting businesses is Accenture. So, Subhashis, maybe you can tell us how Accenture sees the metaverse.
Thank you. For Accenture, if I take a broader view from the services perspective, right, and all what the previous speakers have said are all true, I would put it in two words. Metaverse is the internet of places. Metaverse is the internet of ownership. If you look how things moved in last 15 years or 20 years or so, we moved from Web 1, which is static HTML pages, to the Web 2, which is social web. And we've had this internet of data, which actually has this programmability in computing and stuff like that. We are now really going to something called Web 3. And there's a version of that called Web 3.0. So I would actually bring up the other part of it. Internet of places, because you can actually be in a place through different UX or UX or interactive devices like AR, XR, MR, and mixed reality and other things. Internet of ownership, because it's important how people are using Metaverse, because a lot of use cases that we are seeing today as a services company is actually about token economy. So you build something, it could be a game, it could be a digital artifact, and then you essentially create your own creator stamp on it. So we call this even creative economy. And then you create your own network to kind of send it across. You would have heard of things like, I'm not going into Bitcoins, but you heard of Ethereum networks and stuff like that, where you can create those non-fungible tokens called NFTs, and you can share them across. So Metaverse, to some extent, is essentially all this. Like, people are building things for their training, their onboarding, the games, the changing those, video meetings into putting your avatars in, having some kind of a collaborative exchanges, having some sort of industrial troubleshooting together, in a collaborative manner. And also, people are looking at how do we monetize that? How do we monetize the network? How do we monetize the tremendous power of creating those digital assets and monetizing them and sharing them?
Subhashish, you mentioned Web3, and I think you've taken us to a point a little further ahead in the conversation, but I think I'll just jump there. Web 1.0 was the static internet. Web 2 was the internet as platform with user-generated content, but it's now proposed that Web 3 is the decentralized internet, right? One that potentially relies on blockchain technology, as you mentioned with NFT. But this raises issues around interoperability, closed universes versus open universes, the ability of users to go from one ecosystem to another ecosystem, centralized versus decentralized. So, some of you are with companies that have established platforms, and some of you also see this in terms of decentralization. Sunil, I just thought I'd start with you in terms of how Meta sees the centralization versus decentralization, sort of the governance of the metaverse.
Thanks. For us, it's very clear that Metaverse is not a solitary project of a single firm. We believe that we all collectively are going to build the Metaverse in India. That means the largest population of app developers, I think we will have by 2025. Millions of content creators that Subhashish just referenced. The 100 unicorns that are now in place. So this is our vision of the metaverse. We don't see users having their assets trapped within a single metaverse, whether that is a Apple metaverse or a Google metaverse or a Meta metaverse. We want users to be able to travel freely across an open and interoperable metaverse. So I'll say two things about that. The first is the tech itself. Girish was talking or making the argument that there is no canonical definition of the metaverse, and you could have metaverses that don't implicate AR, VR, XR, etc. I completely agree. One of the most important open source projects from Meta is No Language Left Behind 200. It is a self-supervised AI model that works particularly well for low resource languages. And as we know, many Indic languages are low resource languages. There is no availability of digital corpora. And this is also directly speaking to what Kamal said, which is based on that open source project, No Language Left Behind, folks will be able to speak across Indian languages without going through intermediary steps like text, or without going through an intermediary language like English. And then the second point I want to make is about how we view the governance, as you asked. We have recently published a policy which informs how developers can govern their own metaverse applications. So it is a code of conduct for metaverse, for virtual experiences. And all we have done as Meta is set a minimum bar in terms of what is absolutely unacceptable. but we expect there to be a diversity of applications and services, some perhaps for mature audiences, some for children, some for the general public, some experiences that are tightly configured for a small number of people. And the developers that build these experiences, they would be able to have the detailed codes of conducts that will be applicable over and above the minimum standard that Meta would expect in metaverses that it has some contribution towards.
So if Kamal wants to come and offer his learning and training platforms in Meta's environment, he'll have no problem doing that.
Yeah, he will set his own rules for the educational experience. I think Kamal will agree with us that some things like bullying, etc., we definitely don't want in any metaverse. And that's, so it's a single, I think it's a 2-page sort of minimum standard of what absolutely can't happen, such as crime and fraud and impersonation. But apart from that, Kamal will decide what happens in his metaverse.
Right. Girish and Uttara, you guys also are with companies that have platforms and a large number of users. Do you see it similarly to Sunil, or maybe a little bit differently?
So I guess from my perspective, right, so there are some lessons to be learned from Web 1. One of my favorite things about Web 1 was that there were no walled gardens, right? It was open, it was accessible, everybody could participate in it. And really, I think, as all of us sitting here as the ecosystem, if our goal is to ensure ubiquity of these technologies, we should try to ensure that there are as low barriers to participation in these technologies as possible, right? And really, I think from like a regulatory perspective, I'm a policy person, so I can speak to that perhaps, is that, we ought to be avoiding as an ecosystem and even as policymakers a situation of like cartelization, right? Where there are a handful of players, government or private, that create the design of these ecosystems or the rules of the game for how they operate, right? It really should be a shared community-driven endeavor. And so to that extent, right, I do think that we ought to be thinking about interoperability across the value chain, right? So can we think about interoperability from the perspective of the operating system, devices? Can we think about interoperability from the perspective of content applications on these ecosystems as well, so that such that they're able to interact with each other? And really, is there a way for us to ensure that either through mechanisms that industry creates or the ecosystem creates, or do we need to engage with regulation? I just think that these are all important lessons, just from ensuring that this is open and as sort of participatory as possible. So that's how we as Snap think about this.
So my answer may not be as popular, but I think when you reference Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, right, they were all evolutions. It was not overnight, right? And when we start thinking of Web 3 as, this utopian, completely interoperable, decentralized kind of model, I think it's definitely an ideal that we should be working towards. And I do believe that we will get there at some point. But the process from here to there, right, will not necessarily have all those factors as we start off, right? And the reason I say this is from a 2 or 3 different perspectives, right? I think the kind of time, investment, and patience that is needed to create these experiences and to democratize these experiences so that, you have as many users coming on board and experiencing this will require certain platforms to take that initiative and create that, which effectively means that as we start on this road, inevitably these will be centralized platforms, right? And that's the reality of it, right? What we will likely see, and I'll pick on what from a Meta perspective, what was said was the centralized decentralized model, right, where you've got a central platform with partnerships and partner experiences syncing together so that you're essentially able to offer multiplicity of experiences. I think that's the way this will evolve for a while, and the reason I say this is because I think there is also a fundamental lack of awareness and expertise at both ends of the chain, right? On the supply side and on the demand side. And unless both of these evolve in the same direction, it'll be difficult for a full decentralization to genuinely happen, right? I mean, in India, for example, with all the, stuff about blockchain and NFTs, the reality is that most users will not really understand how to even open a wallet, and how to create an NFT wallet, right? So the point is, it's a process. We will get there. I think almost everybody is agreed to the fact that this needs to be interoperable. It needs to be decentralized. But the process of getting there will involve some form of centralization with a whole lot of partnerships across the ecosystem to be able to create those kind of experiences.
Great. Kamal, any thoughts before we move on?
No, I think I kind of agree. And just a summary of what we are trying to do at ByteEdge around this decent Web 3.0 blockchain, etc. I think micro-credentialing platforms like digital badging are becoming rather pervasive, at least in the edtech field, right? I agree that there needs to be standards. If you see pedagogy of learning, there is no pedagogy for metaverse, right? And that those instructional designing elements don't exist for Meta at this point of time, which is both an opportunity and a challenge. The fact is that there are some unique opportunities here. And whether it's centralized or decentralized, or how much Web3 progresses in a manner in which it progresses, all depends. And I do see some movement in GitHub and open source, and there is an element out there. But the area that I want to focus is that one of the key elements, which could be a concern, I get that, is also anonymity. And from an education point of view, think about the fact at a corporate level that 78 to 80% of learning is informal, okay, which is from peer to peer, from a veteran to a new joinee, new hire, etc. Let me give another example. You all have been in classrooms in schools. How many of you did raise hands to ask questions? Simply because you didn't want it to come in the limelight or did not want to face that attention. Web 3.0 offers the anonymity to ask that question. Now, there is some benefit of that. Yes, there is abuse and other stuff that can happen. If we can strike the right balance in any app in between the two, use tokenization if you have to, or other elements of tech that you have to, I think it's a massive opportunity for transformation. But if we get scared of any technology which happens with any change or any disruption, then yeah, all kind of skepticism can grow.
Speaking of tech, sorry, was someone else wanted to jump in? Nope. Okay. Speaking of technology, I think there are some challenges but opportunities in terms of the technology that's underlying the metaverse. Of course, there's the headsets for VR or the AR technologies as well, but also some of the behind the scenes technologies, large cloud computing, AI, machine learning, all of that are connectivity that are underlying the metaverse. So I'm wondering how people see the challenges and the opportunity in the metaverse. I think Accenture might be a good place to start, given all of the work that you guys do in the services space.
Yeah, right. Technology is really a big challenge, because what is happening is that our clients are trying to jump onto the metaverse. It's like a new buzzword, the shiny city on the hill, and you want to be there. And then you see that when you really scratch inside the metaverse platforms, they are still in the making, right? They're not there yet. And if I look at that, it's essentially a continuum, right? Where do you want to be? You want to be in a full physical world or a full virtual world. If you want to be a full virtual world, you actually need absolute attention of everybody who is there. So that needs a kind of a head-mounted display, which are very clumsy. Now, you cannot perhaps put, to due respect, even if you put an Oculus 2 Pro, you can't keep that for more than half an hour before your head starts spinning. HoloLens went better. Google Glass actually was taken away. There has to be a change in form factor of what actually look at the end user device that we're looking at. People are looking at different types of end users devices. Maybe AR is better that way, because you can actually look at from your old mobile devices what's actually going on. And then second thing is, of course, the bandwidth. You have to really stream very high fidelity data in a multiplayer, a multi-user environment. And there are challenges. You have a metaverse conference going on with thousands of users joining all over the world. You will see they are not in sync. You will see there are a lot of issues coming up. Then the third thing is actually content creation. That's a huge case, right? I think there's a lot of companies will be coming in the content creation space. It's not just taking a 2D content and putting in the 3D, but it's essentially looking at the storyboard in a different way and expressing in a different way, getting into something called, I think from the gaming company perspective, it's called procedural content generation. How do you actually take this in the 3D environment and stuff like that? The next point is, of course, the ethics and trust and safety. As long as you are in walled garden in terms of what you are doing, maybe you're taking a self-learned course or something like you're learning cooking or something like that, you are in a kind of very sterile environment. But if you are getting into, you are seeing what's actually happening in social networks today, I would imagine what would happen when you actually take your virtual avatars there. And there's a very interesting space. So I think there's some kind of a self-guidance and self-regulation, and also some platform regulations required. And I think finally is also the case of the platform itself, the no-code, low-code platforms, because we talked about the creator economy. People want to build things by themselves. So you cannot expect everybody to learn Julia or those high-end languages and then really get into the next version of XR apps to really find out what's going on. There has to be some kind of a marketplace where you can actually put those apps and get there. I think in corporates is happening actually. When you are taking those training contents and bring them to that XR environment, it's not that easy. So there's a huge demand for those app developers and content creators. So I see there's a work in progress. Maybe we'll solve some of these as we go along.
So of course, I do want to go to the identity and safety issues, but before we do, on the technology front, Sunil, you got name checked there with your Oculus headset. Any comments you want to make?
Yeah, I think these are still early days. Our founder, CEO says that we're at least 10 years away from, he said that last year, so 9 years away from a mature metaverse ecosystem. And just to give a little more color to the problem statement that Subhashish articulated. So what we want is a pair of spectacles about 5 millimeters thick. And within that, we need hologram displays, projectors, batteries, radios, custom silicon chips, cameras, speakers, sensors to map the world around you. So that's a lot of technology in a very small device. And to make that happen, we need all the support from policymakers that we can have. Currently, at least in countries like India, we would have to deliver the bandwidth that Subhashish is talking about. And I'll again add a little bit of color. If you are participating in a video call today, it's about 500 kbps connectivity that you need. If you're streaming high-res video, then it's asymmetric 1.8 Mbps link that you would need to have a good experience. For the metaverse, at least today, we believe that you would need at least 25 Mbps symmetric link up and down with the very same speed. And to do that, what we are hoping policymakers across the world will enable is the use of Wi-Fi technology in 6 gigahertz band by delicensing that band. Delicensing that band both for 2.4 gigahertz and for 5 gigahertz has resulted in tremendous innovation and economic opportunity. And as far as the headsets are concerned, there are two critical issues, again, to add a little more color to what Subhashish said. One is the headset cannot hold a battery that will last long enough, even perhaps for the 30 minutes that Subhashish is able to take. And then there will be overheating of the headsets, because if we were to implement the 5G standard directly into the headset. So we need some kind of offloading, and ideally 5G on a base station and then Wi-Fi to the headset. That would be the current vision. Of course, we have no idea what's going to happen in 9 years.
Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to make a point here from two angles, right? I think when we think of metaverse for India, right? All of what we've discussed till now is all the efforts that's sort of pretty much going on globally, right? But at least what I've realized in the way digital has evolved in India, you don't take a tech and force India to adopt it, right? You fix your tech so that it works for India, right? And I think that's a very important way to look at even this, right? Because yes, form factor, bandwidth, all those elements are challenges today. But I think the real challenge is how do you still democratize the metaverse experience, and how do you offer those experiences to Indian users within these constraints? Because these constraints will evolve and go away over time, right? But that doesn't mean that Indians are willing to wait traditionally most metaverse ecosystems think in terms of crypto when it comes to economy, right? But that's a big drawback if you have to rely only on that in India. So then how do you offer fiat currency, right? But if you offer fiat currency, then how do you tag that to crypto, right? And ensure that it's a wholesome economy. So like this, I think when you start thinking through it, there are multiple aspects around technology that will need to be worked on and solved for to create something which, where Indians don't need to wait for a few years to experiences. We can start experiencing this here and now. And in my mind, this is not just true for India. You can actually take this to a whole lot of places in the world once you crack the code over here.
Great. Anything else on the technology issues before I move on? Yeah, Uttara.
Yeah, so, I completely agree with Sunil. Our experience has been identical. Obviously, hardware is critical, right? So the software is the essence of these technologies, but the hardware is how users are able to access and interact with these technologies. And at the moment, it's exactly what Sunil said. I had occasion to speak with our Snap Labs folk in London earlier this year, and they described it to be exactly word for word. These devices, by the way, are meant to be nice looking, light, but also contain a good quality battery, several different types of chips, basically a supercomputer inside of them, and a high quality camera. And it's just really difficult to achieve that where we are right now. And what I'm hearing really across the entire panel also is that this seems to be a problem that everybody is aligned is worth investing in. Right? I do believe that this is actually where the race lies. I think all of the companies are making sure that we invest resources and invest R&D to ensure that this is solved. And Sunil is right. In about 9 years' time, hopefully we move the needle significantly.
And maybe a great opportunity for India on that front too as well. So I want to turn a little bit to some of the issues around identity, privacy, safety, et cetera. Kamal, you brought it up earlier. Folks who have been paying attention to the news in the past few weeks have seen Elon Musk's plan to allow people to start buying blue check marks on Twitter has already led to some problems for Elon. But it highlights the issues around identity and trust, which I think will only grow in the metaverse as people start embracing digital avatars. Meanwhile, consumer privacy is also a really concern. So there's a lot of social impacts of technology here, I think, that need to be addressed, that we need to think through. Sunil or Kamal want to start us off on this?
Yeah, happy to. So as far as, let me keep it at Whiteage and learning context, and I can talk about the rest as well. But from a learning point of view, there are different monetization that can happen of learning data. It can be used positively for talent mobility or succession planning or talent hiring and etc. etc. Um, Recently, there have been more waves around silent resignation, attrition, work from home, hybrid. We've gone through all these kind of phases, the period of great resignation, etc. I think we are in a stage, and this is one of the things I was discussing with my co-founder, was we need to move from e-learning to we-learning. Okay, I know the experience isn't great with the current development in metaverse, right? And we need these years and everything, but I think to enable we-learning, they can go to a Taylor Swift concert, if they can go for, you know, New York Times New Year's celebration, perhaps that we-learning use case can happen earlier. Um, my point is that yes, there will be concerns around privacy, how you monetize that data, what kind of role that you have, and how do you ensure that the user knows what kind of behavioral data that you are using for the purpose of recommendation or for purpose of you know, providing him with the right personalization, and where you are taking away and using it for monetization, for example with the gig economy or a marketplace kind of thing. So there are both these possibilities exist in the learning space, the talent, and it has to be seen how companies, you know, there seems to be a bit of a,
Yeah, we have a problem. Let's swap mics here.
and it remains to be seen how we draft a policy at a country level, or there is a policy at a meta, which metaverse you enter, there is a policy that defines that. So yeah, it's not defined yet, so it's very difficult to comment, but those are the directions that I see, at least in the e-learning space, of what concerns exist today.
Yeah, Uttara, you're a privacy and data protection expert. What are your thoughts on how this translates into the metaverse?
Yeah, great question. I do think that, you know, existing and on also from an India perspective, up and coming frameworks on data protection and privacy are an opportunity for us to think about how, number one, you know, users can be bestowed with rights with regards in these, and second, that is the platforms and the players that run these space in existing data protection frameworks to do that, number one. The second thing, of course, is that, you know, from a creating a culture of privacy perspective, it's important for all of the players in the ecosystem to be transparent about the way that data is going to be collected, stored, processed, used, and disposed of. Right? That is critical, and I think that perhaps early interventions that encourage that sort of practice is helpful in terms of ensuring, you know, or preventing privacy harms in a sense. Then apart from this, right, there are some things from a Snap perspective. I can speak from our company's perspective. You know, when you're collecting data on spectacles, you're collecting much more data and sometimes more sensitive data than you would say through an application. And that's because, you know, this is something that like a device can scan your retina sometimes, or it's collecting data around your entire spatial, whatever's ahead of you. So in doing that, I guess there are a couple of things that device manufacturers and other entities can play. Number one, try and ensure that sensitive personal data, to the extent that you're collecting it, is stored and processed locally on the device itself, right? As opposed to it being processed elsewhere. That's something that's important to do. The second thing that can be done is to ensure that the data, the sensitive personal data that you are collecting, is encrypted in rest and also in transit. That's important as well, because there's a lot going on. It's a dynamic sort of technology, and so ensuring encryption is critical. Yeah, and I guess that overall, you know, some of these things can provide like a start point for us to start to have discussions around data protection and privacy with regards how users interact with these platforms and technologies.
Great. Any other? Nope. Okay. We're just coming towards the end of our time. So I thought maybe I'd end because this is the Bangalore Tech Summit, U.S. India Business Council here. So I thought I'd sort of combine my last two questions, which are, how do each of you sort of see the opportunity for India, in the metaverse, especially with 3 American companies, 2 Indian companies here, and the specific role that India and Indian technology has to play. And combined with that, how do we make the metaverse accessible to the vast majority of the Indian public? That's a particular issue around accessibility here in India. So if you could sort of take each of those, we've talked a little bit about the language issues and some of the other things, but maybe we could each sort of offer some thoughts on that. Subhash, maybe I thought I'd go with you first on that.
Very interesting question. Sincerely, I want India to move above of what we are doing today from the services space. There's a lot of content moderation work happening in India. We want really to go above that to, kind of getting really synthetic generation of stuff. For example, in Metaverse, there's a lot of opportunity on AI and other technologies to play on synthetic data generation, for example, because that is going to be the era of content in the next decade. So there's a huge opportunity in front of Indian companies and startups to really get into the gaming platforms or the learning platforms or the collaboration platforms, create content for them, create synthetic data for them and stuff like that. The second area I would say is essentially about getting into some of those things which are kind of, I would say, because we researched some of this in our India labs in Accenture, is about how do you really get into avatar technologies. When you say avatar technologies, not just making these avatars, but actually making them really follow you in spirit, right? So essentially infusing the social aspects of it, infusing the ethics, infusing other other human-like, kind of things of the technology. The third is essentially what we call human plus workers. So there's a very important aspect of productivity enhancement through metaverse, and it's not just because metaverse is the channel through which you get the productivity, but there's another set of technologies that includes blockchain, IoT, sensor technologies, that includes the AI and ML and other things. So I think that and in robotics as well. So can you do things like future of work by looking at metaverse or metaverse enabled devices and do something that you couldn't do earlier? We are talking about work from home. Metaverse could be a excellent metaphor for work from home, not just for the tech workers, but even for the factory workers. We can do remote factory operations through metaverse and robotics together. So there's a whole bunch of opportunities ahead for the Indian tech entrepreneurs and moving up the value chain there.
So essentially 2 questions, right? And I think let me answer the second one to start off. I think for metaverse to truly work in a country like India, you need to be able to democratize it, right? Democratizing, again, though, has 2 angles, right? One is the user side of it, but also very importantly, the brand side of it, right? Users and for a user democratization, we've spoken about the tech angle and how some of those need to be solved from a very unique India requirement perspective, right? But there are also other aspects in terms of the nature of the experience, the nature of the user journey, right? Needs to be something that's simple, easy, convenient, and frictionless from an India context perspective, number one. Number two, at its core, it has to be fun, and it also has to be about communities if you really want this to be democratized, right? And as and that's the reason why, if you really look at it, a lot of the effort and emphasis that's happening on the metaverse is from gaming companies and social platforms, right? Because these are in a lot of ways the 2 pillars which will ensure this adoption goes mass. If it's not fun, nobody's going to turn up, and that's the reason why we are so interested in it. That's the reason why you've got a Fortnite, you've got Roblox being successful at it globally, because at the end of it, it is fun, right? And same thing with with communities. Unless you're able to build communities, unless you're able to create that entire sharing model and social angle to it, it's not going to grow organically, right? So that's, I think, one angle. Same with the brands, right? If you don't offer the ability for brands to have these fun, engaging experiences in the metaverse, but at the same time, do it in a way which is fast, efficient, and cheap, it's only going to be the top 10, 15 brands who will be there on the metaverse, right? And not your local fashion shop. Because honestly, he also deserves to be there, right? But how do you get him there? So again, what is important in our view is some kind of a platformization toolkit, DIY model for brands, where they can really get to at least a large level of the metaverse on their own using some of these. So I think these are some specifically unique aspects that are going to be very important if you want to democratize the metaverse for India. From a US India perspective, I think what I would focus on is two aspects. Right? I think a lot of the heavy cutting edge investment and research is going to happen in the US, right? Particularly when it comes to hardware, right? And I think that's a very important process that needs to follow. And I think there's a lot to learn from there. I think where India can really contribute is, again, how do you make a lot of these technologies far more efficient, right? And far more scalable, because that's what honestly, we are good at, and we've seen that in Web 2 environments, right? And I think it'll go up to another level in Web 3, and I think that's where our efficiency will lie. And a good example I always think of is when Google started UPI payments in India, right? This is the test market, and now they're talking about how do you take it to the rest of the world. UPI is looking to go into the rest of the world because it's a unique problem that they ended up solving. And I think that's the kind of opportunity India will have to offer to the rest of the world on this front.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so I'll not talk about democratization. I think it has been said enough. All I can say is that on the India-US front, right, being the two largest, India being larger now as English-speaking population, I would presume that they are going to be largely the people who will get into the metaverse as the two countries. You are right, hardware will be predominantly driven from some of the US MNCs. But the content, the creator economy, the engagement, the simulations, how will you simulate a conflict management simulation for an employee in metaverse without actually another person? How will that Raj speak in English? With whom will he speak with? I think there is this huge service opportunity, content creation opportunity. Cost arbitrage is always going to exist to some extent. But I think the deeper opportunity out here is, and why it will matter is, I was talking to Burning Glass. They are one of the providers of data to World Economic Forum. And they said that 92% of job descriptions today do not mention a certificate, right? And we're talking about education in US. Now, it's predominantly talks about skill sets. Asking what are you good at or what you know, not even what you're good at. I think the opportunity is that the discovery of profiling in metaverse will allow people to explore passions in a much more immersive, deeper way. What that will result is that employees will create their certificate profile, skill profile, and then what are their ambitions, passions, what are they really good at profile. Okay, that could be an avatar for all I care, but that can be a very, very important point from a tech hiring or any kind of hiring for that matter. And think about if the industry moves towards gig and passion-based workers who love that doing that job, and if that be the calibration point, then there is a huge India-US amalgamation that needs to happen. So right now it's all import going to out there from skilling and some coming back, some not. That can potentially change as well.
Sunil, Uttara, any brief thoughts?
You've asked me to be brief, so I'll have to censor myself. Very quickly to what Girish said about the necessity of bridge technologies for those that cannot afford the devices. We at Meta have Horizon Worlds 2D, which is a way of accessing 3D worlds, but using 2D devices. And to the Bangalore question and to the India-US question, having lived 47 of my years in Bangalore, that question resonates deeply. And I'm thinking about graduating from engineering school in the mid 90s and the big Y2K opportunity that existed for entrepreneurs in Bangalore. India did not have that many COBOL systems that needed the date field to be patched. But Indian engineers patched the date field in COBOL systems across the globe. And of course, America was the lion's share of that market opportunity. And as far as the metaverse is concerned, I see exactly the same thing happening. India will become a production market for the metaverse first before it becomes a consumption market, primarily because of the talent that we possess. This is not just me saying it. Mark Zuckerberg himself expects this to happen. And that's what makes me super excited. We did some analysis on the 10-year impact on global GDP and on the GDP of individual nation states. For India, the impact is much higher than the global GDP impact. It will be around 4.6% of India's GDP could be contributed through metaverse-related technologies.
Really nothing novel to add to everything that everyone's been saying. Yeah, I do think there's a similar optimism at Snap as well. India is where we expect to see a proliferation of not just from a user market perspective, but more specifically from building applications, services, products, devices, the whole host, right? So we do think that across the value chain, India is well poised to take a leadership role in the building of these ecosystems. And yeah, really, that's all I have to say. Nothing more to add apart from everybody else.
Thank you all for a really fascinating conversation. Let's please thank our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dilip Srihari, for moderating this informative session, and I thank all the panelists. So may I now request Ms. Nivrutti Rai, Country Head Intel India, Vice President Intel Foundry Services, to give a talk on the digital health changing the course of healthcare innovation. Ms. Nivrutti Rai is Vice President Intel Foundry Services at Intel Corporation and Country Head of Intel India. She heads the Automotive Solutions Group for Intel Foundry Services, providing design services and custom solutions to foundry customers. Based in Bangalore, she provides overall engineering and business unit leadership and leads operations for the site driving innovation, cross-group efficiencies, and execution for engineering teams delivering a global products and roadmaps. May I request Ms. Nivrutti Rai to kindly come onto the dais. Ma'am, please.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, guys? So I know it's late in the day, and I know Ambika for sure is very hungry. I know many of us want a nice cup of tea, but I will try to do my best to make my talk exciting. I'm going to talk about digital health. So all the introduction that you heard about me talks about semiconductors, talks about automotives. You must be wondering how semiconductor, how automation, how AI fits into health. And I'm going to tell you that I actually see value both ways, from medicine to health into semiconductors, as well as from semiconductors into the health segment. Is there a mic that I really don't like to just stay at one place fixed. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. I feel captive, if I have to stand at one place. Thank you very much. So I'm going to talk about digital health, and throughout my presentation, you'll see which way, sorry, I'm really sorry. Which way do I point? Okay, changed. So before I go, let me just set a little context as to what is happening in the world. The world population over the last 2 decades has gone up by 2 billion. We're about 8 billion people. 2 decades ago, we were 6. Not only that, let me tell you one more interesting statistic. Every 100 years, average longevity of human being goes up by 10 years. How so? All of the innovations in health. And wait till I end my presentation to tell you what could happen by 2040. I also must tell you there has been a lot of analysis. Some refute, some agree that there are about 10,000 plus known diseases. 10,000 plus known diseases and only 500 plus treatments. So the huge gap, a lot of innovation needs to be done. I also must tell you that 20 years ago, to do 1 teraflop of computation, and I'll tell you why teraflop is important. 1 teraflop of compute cost $50 million. Today, in the palm of your hand, in your phone, 1 teraflop. Why is teraflop important? Because 3 teraflops can do genome sequencing. 20 years ago, we did the very first genome sequencing and it cost the world $2.7 billion. Million times innovation, and today the genome sequencing costs us $300. Many of our phones have the capability of 3 teraflops. So the bottom line of this whole slide is, what worked in the past is not going to work in the future. We have to come up with ways where we could address healthcare for billions and billions of people. We have to look at ways to address population scale problem. We have to get the affordability. Just let me tell you, I loved this analysis because it just is so much like semiconductors. Our body is like a semiconductor. We have a display with our eyes. We have, interconnects with our hands and legs. And we have a whole lot of organs, pituitary gland to our lungs, to our heart. Let me tell you how it is made. Our body has 20 unique amino acids. Amino acids are nothing but chemicals. 20 unique amino acids form millions of unique proteins. Many amino acids come together and form different shapes, a shape of a C, a shape of an O. And what is an amino acid? It's just hydrocarbons. Those are inside our body. 20 amino acids create millions of protein. How? They create through our basic building block, which is our DNA. DNA is another molecule with a whole lot of atoms. And you've seen those spiral diagrams. The backbone is sugar, and then you see 4 different nucleotides. DNA has small portion RNA. RNA creates genes. Genes create chromosomes. All of that are some sort of machinery that takes the amino acids and makes proteins. Now these proteins makes living cells in a body. In an entire system that we have, 1 trillion cells. Many of those trillion cells come together to create many tissues. Many of those tissues then build the organs. It is like semiconductors. You start with sand, you build a transistor, you build an IP, you build an SoC, you put it on a platform, you create software. The software runs the entire system. That's how our body works. In a semiconductor, if you have a problem, you replace a transistor, put another. In software, you cut certain code and you create, another function out of that code. So believe me, our body is nothing but a lot of chemistry in play, a lot of computer science in play, a lot of software in play. Honestly, a lot of those, vaccines that you saw was essentially nothing but a program, and you're inserting something and, creating your body to become healthy through those vaccines, those RNA type vaccines.
So what is important is our DNA, which is the basic building block of or blueprint of our body. Now, I told you that, a DNA creates RNA, creates chromosomes, create inheritance through our genes. What is interesting about DNA is amongst all of us that are sitting here, 99+% of the human genome is identical. Me and Ambika have 99.9% similarity. But that 0.1% with the variations of very common variations, very unique variations in that less than 1% different genome makes me susceptible to different kinds of diseases, different kinds of infections versus her. How does that difference happen? That difference happened, one, because our less than 1% DNA is different, but then where we lived, what we eat, whether I smoke or not, what are some of the healthcare policies that I leverage versus not leverage? All of the social networking around us create that difference between Ambika and me. Now, we have 3 billion plus pairs of DNA and only 1% is different. But with those all variations, each one of us have about 3 million differences that we have to search and identify which difference is causing which disease. So I really believe diseases, medication needs to be individualized. Very much like your cell phone, you like certain color, you like certain songs, you like certain volume, you like, certain capabilities. Our treatment needs to be individualized. And the reason I shared all those numbers, 1 trillion cells, 3 billion pairs of DNA, is a normal human being cannot do a lot of individualization in time. So to find the 1% variation between Ambika and me, and to find what is the reason that's giving me this problem and not her, is finding a needle in the haystack. And how can you do it? You can only do it through automation, through AI, through a lot of technologies that are available. Nowadays, what is happening, even before you are born, there's been data that's being collected of you. There is amniotic fluid that's tested prenatal to figure out, what is a child's health. Once the child is born, there is something called an APGAR score, some measurement of your heart. Immunization, family records, outpatient records, you name it, the kind of information on me, healthcare, is wealth of data. And I really believe, while 100 megabytes of data a year may not sound too much, because that, each movie can be significant amount of megabytes. So each person is generating 100 megabytes of data that's being collected, valuable information that can help you and can help your generations ahead. Why can't we leverage that? The other thing is, all of that data is available. What can we do with it? We can create a digital twin. I need a heart replacement. You know why the heart replacement surgeries were not successful? Because my heart is very different from, all of the other hearts that are sitting in this room. So 3D printing through digital twinning is enabling highly successful heart transplants when we are growing those hearts. Medical edge AI. AI is being leveraged not at the cloud level, but something inside the hospital based on all our information to say, okay, Nivriti, paracetamol does not work. For her, ibuprofen works better because XYZ. Digital biology. My entire body can be digitized through genomes, through a lot of 3D print. I can create a digital biology for any organ. And that's how we're going to get into the individualized treatment and maintenance and cure for each one of us. Enterprise enterprise AI in healthcare analytics. I mean, everything is being analyzed to come up with how can we make treatment, how can we make, diagnosis for you better. I just want to give you a few examples. How did this first donation after circulatory death, let me explain what this is. Once the person has died, then this heart was taken from a dead person and transplanted into others. Has this never been done in the world? It has. I believe it was done in Russia. But first time it happened in Duke a couple of years ago. A dead heart was transplanted. How? The heart was put into a machine with a lot of AI. All of the veins were functioning as if this heart is alive. And they did it for 24 hours such that the heart could be shipped from a New York to a Frankfurt and still be able to be leveraged. A lot of times living people have difficulty donating their organs, but it's far easy to have a dead person donate organs. So with technology, that's what can be enabled. AI can spot, issues in kidney before doctors can. And I'll tell you, I have been part of Narayan Hridayalaya board, and Dr. Shetty says he looks at data and months before he can predict if a heart attack is going to happen. Similarly, AI systems to track blood course. A lot of you must have done lipid profiles. Technology is enabling all of that. What are we doing as Intel? I'm very excited about how, technology like AI, how technology like, blockchain, how technology which is secure, federated learning can be leveraged for diagnosis. So my focus has been to look at cancer, breast cancer, to look at retinopathy and bone degeneration. And we've seen significant efficiency and accuracy. We have partnered with government. We have created an applied AI research center in Telangana, IIIT, Hyderabad, PHFI have contributed. What are we doing? We are collecting data, making it open source. We are making sure, we have solutions of AI like federated learning, where you don't have to ship data, but you can ship pieces of module, essentially saying that you're giving juice of the data without giving the data. So our focus is how can technology benefit in healthcare? One thing I must tell you, I'm also learning from healthcare. Do you know our DNA? 1 gram of DNA holds 200 petabyte of data. And just to tell you, 1 petabyte is 11,000 movies, 4K display movies. So I'm trying to say, okay, how can I build a storage like that? DNA is 1,000 more dense than any solid state device, 300 times more accurate. So while we are providing technology to help healthcare, I'm also learning from healthcare, how do we improve technology? I want to finish with, I will tell you the progress that is being made in healthcare. It's still scratching the surface, but I believe, and many genetic engineers, and it is a very interesting term, not genetic doctors or genetic researchers, genetic engineers are saying by 2048, death will be optional. They're also saying age will be reversible. So be prepared. Technology is going to do changes. Of course, this is a dream, but this dream will enable at least the young ones to not go away, not leave us, live a full life. But a lot of possibilities, a lot of life-saving techniques we're working on, and I believe there is a lot more that can happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the informative address. And now we shall move on to the last panel discussion of today. That is digital health, changing the course of healthcare, innovation with adoption, evidence, and regulation as key drivers. Ms. Bagmisika Puhan, Associate Partner Digital Health, TMT Law Practice, will be the moderator of this panel discussion. Mr. Rupam Chowdhury, Global Head of IoT and Digital Engineering, Tata Consultancy Services Limited, will be one of the panel discussion members. And Mr. Santosh Salimat, Principal Architect, Google Cloud. Murali Badrinarayanan, Managing Director and Lead Health Practice, Accenture's Advanced Technology Centers in India. And Mr. Arvind Kumar Pandian, Project Manager, Strategic Partnerships, Digital Health, USED. And Mr. Ashwin Dharmavaram Bhogendra, Senior Director, Commercial Excellence, will be a panelist. So I request the moderator as well as all the panelists to kindly come onto the dais, and I welcome them.
Hello, everyone. I think we already have quite a dwindling audience. We hope that our discussion does not push you guys off the edge. We'll try our best to ensure that you are engaged in the conversation. Adding to what ma'am said, here I'll give brief introduction about each of the speakers that we have today. So now Mr. Arvind Kumar Pandian is the Senior Advisor, Strategic Partnerships with the USAID, and he has had over 25 years of experience in the development sector and works closely with diverse stakeholders, including policymakers, corporations, industry associations, and several consulting firms to leverage private sector resources in the development goals. We have Ashwin Bhogendra with us, who is the Senior Director, Commercial Excellence with Axtria. He has over 18 years of experience in the pharma commercial operations space. In his onshore and offshore roles, he has worked extensively with about top 50 pharma clients, advising them in the areas of commercial excellence in a variety of therapy areas. We also have Mr. Murali Badrinarayan with us. He's the Managing Director and Lead Health Practice, Accenture's Advanced Technology Centers in India. He has over 25 years of experience predominantly in healthcare. And as a key leader in Accenture's health practice in India, he works closely with numerous hospitals, pharmacies, and health plans around the world in their modernization journey and accelerating their digital transformation to provide seamless care delivery. We also have Mr. Rupam Chaudhary, who is the Global Head IoT and Digital Engineering with TCS. He has had over 28 years of experience in product development, commercialization, and plant solutions, especially in the healthcare sector, medical device and diagnostics companies. Rupam has consulted leading healthcare companies in the business of a diverse range of interventional and restorative therapies. Our final panelist is Mr. Santosh Salimat, who is the principal architect for Google Cloud. He's a technology leader with 2 decades of global experience in successfully enabling and transforming several business segments using cutting-edge enterprise technologies and building data-driven AI and ML innovations. Now, with those introductions, I will just set the context for this conversation today. Now, you have heard from our previous speaker, Ms. Nivruti. She led a lot of stress on how the healthcare system in the country and around the world is undergoing a lot of change. Now, one of the most dramatic aspects or overhaul that has taken place in the sector is that now we are moving towards a wellness theme, going away from what we used to be or what we used to consider as an illness regime. Now, with this change, one of the major drivers in the healthcare ecosystem has been the digital ecosystem. I will not be talking about the types of tools or solutions or products that are available in the market for consumers as well as stakeholders, both in the private and the public side, who are keen to adopt it into their regular practice and to drive home a very close-knit or a very well-organized, well-oiled healthcare ecosystem. What I'll set the context for is the regulatory and the policy framework within which the digital ecosystem is thriving in the country. Over the past 10-15 years, we first saw with the introduction of the electronic health record standards, which came out in 2013 and were revisited in 2016, that the government of India, through the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, showed the path towards how adoption of technology is becoming rampant in the healthcare sector, and what were the needs to plug the data that was being collected or the healthcare solutions that were being adopted into the regular practice in engagement with end users. Now, along with that, somewhere between 2017 2018, we saw that the National Digital Health Mission came out with a blueprint, which did not just speak about the regulatory and policy aspects, but also spoke about the technology stacks or interoperability, which was required to be brought into this highly heterogeneous healthcare ecosystem that's prevalent in the country. Since then, we have seen that the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare has come out with several regulations which continue to be the law, especially in the digital health. We saw the incidence of the telemedicine practice guidelines, which came out in 2020. And since then, we have also seen that the NDHM, which has been rechristened as the Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission, also has given a lot of roadmap, including creating a single data identifier, which will be unique to every individual, known as the ABHA, which would either help bring about all the healthcare and medical records of a particular individual be stored with a central repository. While there are drivers within the technology and the regulatory spectrum, there's a lot of challenges that we are seeing that the stakeholders, both in the private and public side, face on a day-to-day basis in the implementation bit. So with that, I conclude the context. I'm setting out the context, and I will start with addressing the panel further to take up questions, and we can have a conclusive discussion. I want to set it up right now that we are going to do a first round of questions, and then I'll be summarizing what we are discussing. Then we'll do, depending on the time that is available to us, we'll do a second round of discussion, and we will try to keep a 5 to 10 minutes break for anybody if they have any direct questions to us. Otherwise, we'll be available off the dais also. Now, with the context that I have set, my first question is to Arvind, and I would want for you to bring to us all that has been done by USAID in terms of the digital health initiatives that have been taking place in the country, or any parallels that can be drawn from what has been done in other jurisdictions and could have been replicated here, or can be replicated, or if you're facing challenges in that aspect.
Thanks, Bagmi. Can you hear me? Thanks for that question, and thanks for setting up the regulatory aspects very clearly. USAID, as you know, is a lead agency for the US government for all developmental programs. In India, we have been working for close to now 60, 65 years. We have a bilateral agreement with the government of India, and largely we focus on developmental aspects, whether it's clean energy, food security, health, education. Those are the areas we work. When you take health, we have clear focus areas. Eliminating TB has been one primary focus for us. Preventing maternal and child deaths is the second focus area. Creating an AIDS-free generation is the third area. Strengthening the primary care is the fourth area. So these are the broad health areas that we focus on. All our programs and interventions have been in very, very close coordination with the government of India, and in many cases, the local government. So if you go to the government and speak about our programs, they will be very familiar with what we are currently doing, and they won't be caught into any type of surprises. Our guiding principles of engagements has always been, in addition to working with the governments, local governments, we also work very closely with private sector, whether it's the startups, whether it's the corporates, whether it's the business associations, research and academic institutions. Our focus has largely been not on the top upper class of population. It's been mostly in the rural areas, vulnerable populations. That's the type of audiences which we have been working. Very recently, we have been working on emerging technologies and digital technologies. I won't say we have got a very big experience like most of the corporates have. Probably we'll have been into this field for about 4 to 5 years. And whenever we support a digital intervention, we take into context 3 or 4 important aspects. For example, we always keep the patient and the person as the primary focus. So no solution of us would be sort of a solution for the sake of addressing a problem. It would be first keeping the person as the main focus. Second, all the digital solutions that we have supported has always kept into mind, is it addressing a developmental issue? That is the one core thing which we really take into a context. And finally, we have also known that there has been solutions which has been sort of introduced but has not been scaled up. So we also have the sustainability angle in a very, very, very big way. So those is the core principles that we keep in mind when we have any digital programs. Coming to some of the digital programs that we have supported, specifically on TB. TB is a big issue for India, and though there is about 250,000 TB patients, every year we have about a 6 to 7% loss to follow-up. People don't take the treatment. So there's an AI solution that we have built in where parameters of people are taken from the age, the gender, where did they take the treatment, do they migrate, what's their alcohol habits. And there's an AI solution that we have developed that is sort of giving a prediction. If you have the following parameters, then this person is very likely to be missing their treatment. And there's a system that has been put into for following up those people. There are other solutions that we have worked. For example, with the Government of India, we have collaborated and set up the patient feedback solution. You might have heard about Mera Aspatal. We started in a small way with 100 facilities. Today, it's a pan-India program. More than about 25, 30,000 hospitals are having that in the public health systems. We also have a couple of screening devices. For example, one of the devices is the cough analysis. By just a cough, the scanning of the cough, we are able to sort of understand the abnormalities and then pass on those abnormalities to the healthcare providers. So there's a lot, they don't waste time in sort of going through all the x-rays in the skin. Those are some of the examples, but at a macro level, what we have also done is that we work with the Government of India to sort of set up centers of excellence in artificial intelligence. So there are 3 centers that we are currently working on, 2 aims, one in Delhi and one in Rishikesh. And there's another one with the PGI Chandigarh, sorry, not PGI, PGI Chandigarh. So these are some things which we are currently supporting the Government of India for the digital health programs.
Thanks, Arvind. So there are 4 focus points that Arvind just highlighted here. First being that patient continues to be the central focus in the sector. Second, he mentioned about how their focus has been engaging with the rural healthcare, which means taking healthcare to the last mile. He also mentioned about sustainability. And finally, he discussed about how AI solutions, automated solutions are also helping screen patients, doing the first level of triaging, and then probably taking it back to doctors in higher urban facilities. This ties in very well with what the focus of the government here in the healthcare sector in India is. That brings us right to Ashwin, who can probably tell us that, keeping this discussion in background, how can availability, continued access to data, and a robust analytic mechanism help in bringing the last mile?
So much. I really like how Arvind mentioned 2 things that really struck a chord, which is putting the patient at the center. When you think about the patient, what does the patient really want, right? The first thing is obviously access to affordable care. Everyone wants access to affordable care. We heard the previous talk where it's important to provide personalized care, personalized treatment, very specific to the patient. And from that, best treatment outcomes. How can we get the best outcomes for the patient? And an experience post-outcome. Typically in healthcare, we measure, it's only now that we're measuring outcomes, but are we really measuring patient experience as well, right? Apart from that, patient expects privacy, respect their preferences. In many cases, across the strata, they want to try to self-manage their own health. So we need to try to understand. So the other thing that Arvind said was, what is the focus of what we're trying to solve? When we look at the type of patients, an actual example comes to mind where our driver's wife was suffering from stomach pain. It was identified as liver perforation.
He went to a doctor who he knew, and they gave him a medicine, but then it led to spleen enlargement, and then now they didn't know what to do. The wife is suffering. The experience of the patient in the healthcare system is really bad, right? So then, with that in mind, that he went to another doctor. Apparently, he went to a nephrologist, and now all these are not really connected, right? So with the advent of availability of data, right? Once you have a centralized data of all this, what are some of the things that you can do, right? Once you have data, there are several things that you can do in terms of patient analysis. And that's something that, at least from our firm, we work with life science companies. We do a lot of AI-enhanced patient analytics to look at patient journeys, to understand what is the best treatment, to understand what is the most personalized treatment for the patient. In addition to that, we have companies having personalized patient-level campaigns. So the whole idea is that, can you get the information to the patients themselves, and very targeted information based on the types of things that they are experiencing. In addition to that, you can actually look at the data to also identify the doctors. So we identify, okay, what are the doctors who might treat the patients who fit the new and innovative therapies that I, as a manufacturer, bring. So there would be targeted, information given to the doctor so that that treatment actually reaches the patient. We're also doing things like looking at patient drop-off. How can, why did the patient drop off from therapy? Was it an access issue? Was it a payer issue? And find out how we can fix some of those drop-offs. In addition to that, the whole idea is that how can you leverage this wealth of data and run analytics on top of that. That leads to essentially democratizing the data and insights. I mean, the whole point is, how can you democratize the insights and give that access both to the patient as well as the doctor treating, so that these decisions and intelligence is not centralized.
Thanks, Ashwin. So now when he's talking about how we can leverage on the data that's available for increasing the quality of care as given to the end users, that brings to a very interesting question that I have for Murli, and which is also talking about data. Murli, if you just said some lights or thoughts about how implementation of electronic medical records or health records and clinical decision making or building tools to actually do that and improve quality of care has been, your experience has been in terms of creating of those tools and actually implementing it in the trying to make it interoperable with other systems and things like that.
Can you guys hear me? Thanks. First of all, thanks for having me here. I think if we just pause and reflect on the last 30 months since the onset of COVID, especially in the world of digital health, right? I always borrow the words of Lenin, right? There are decades goes by where nothing happens, and there are a few weeks when the entire decade happens. And we have been trying to infuse digital technologies into healthcare for many, many years. It's not new. But apparently, or unfortunately, the pandemic has to set in to kind of accelerate some of it. Like you said, electronic medical record or EHR is kind of a core of how the transformation happens. It kind of brings in a 360-degree view of the patient. I think you just imagine a doctor, how much he has to know about a patient to be able to treat him, come up with the right treatment plan, right prescriptions. The EMR gives them the entire medical history, allergies, and what is important is it has a lot of tools embedded that kind of gives the clinical decision support. If I am a physician, I'm trying to prescribe a medication, there are tools within EMR that's going to check his allergies. If my dosage is somewhat different or it's not within the guidelines, it kind of prompts the physician. It kind of takes a lot of burden away in terms of clinical decision making and puts in a lot of guidelines and alerts so that the patient gets the right level of care. I think I predominantly work with a lot of hospitals in the US, and if you look at this, the journey, it's been more than 15, 16 years now they have been trying. And many of you might have heard about meaningful use, which is like how the government has tried to make that adoption better, incentivizing in phases, right? First, you start capturing into a common platform, be able to share across hospitals, right? I mean, even today, you go to your primary care physician and you go to a lab and they don't talk to each other. You have to sometimes carry your reports. I think some of the countries have gotten advanced, and like how you mentioned about India's vision, it's very inspiring in terms of where we want to go, and I think I'm really looking forward to that. Just in terms of tools and digital that has come along in the last 30 months that has gotten prominent, telemedicine, right? If I remember March, April of 2020, few of my clients are in New York City, which apparently was at the epicenter of all of this. They typically had around 400 televisits a month. Before that, in a matter of few weeks, they started having 4,000 visits a day. That's how much the technology, the framework, and the infrastructure has to be scaled up to deliver that kind of care delivery. And I know it kind of went up during COVID and kind of stabilized after that. Again, healthcare is still very personal. Not everyone is for that kind of a telemedicine still opening up. But I see it's a big promise for India where I think roughly we have for every 800, 900 people in India, we have one doctor. So I think telemedicine is a huge promise for India in terms of what we can accomplish. There are a lot of health startups that we work with, even personally, where they set up like an 8x8 investigation room, and it does not even have a doctor. And these are in rural villages. People can just walk in, there's only a nurse. You get access with some monitors. There is a doctor on the video that talks. And there is an automated pharmacy medicine dispensing stations. So I think there are a lot of bright ideas and implementations coming up. So it looks pretty positive in that way.
Thanks, Murli. Now with that, the discussion so far has been focusing on quality of care. I have an interesting question for Rupam. Goes beyond this. Now we have spoken about how patient-centric healthcare system is the focus. We are talking about how data is leading to triaging be done by healthcare workers, not just necessarily doctors at the helm of affairs. And Murli also mentioned that, with the onset of COVID, we saw a lot of opportunity for teleconsultation specifically. What are your thoughts about continuity of care? And I know it for a fact, several hospitals, leading hospitals in the country, also have tele-ICUs now. So what challenges do you think, or how do you think these solutions will help in continuity of care, keeping patient at the focus without compromising on the quality of delivery of healthcare which goes to them?
Thanks for the question. I think with the unique health ID and a lot of the comments which were made by my fellow panelists, it yields to the fact that a lot of data inherently will be available to a doctor. Because today, pretty much, it is the bunch of paper that the patient carries of the prior encounters the patient has had on various issues. If it's a chronic issue, you will see that most of the papers relate to that chronic issue, be it diabetes or somebody had a stroke or a cardiac issue, right? So there are two kinds of health continuum. I mean, if you can think about this data ultimately leading to some kind of a predictive thought that this regular, checkups and the data generated thereof should actually lead to a prediction. I would even include family data, and taking off the previous speaker from Intel, that, yeah, I mean, genomics would have a role to play too, but it's kind of utopia to think that where most of the developed countries even today don't have a unified health record, that we would get to do it in India. But there is an opportunity in India, in the sense that the regulations yield to a faster adoption. So the care continuum, in my opinion, should include this database that allows people to be a little bit predictive. And then for a particular person, which is personalized, there be the continuum of care, more than the health continuum of care, which is very personalized. So that every time the person, no matter where the person is, so today I'm in Bangalore, but I live in Delhi, I should have the ability to go to any physician because of any condition I might think I'm suffering for, and that physician should have access to the continuum of care that has happened so far to make the right decision. So, and today the sensorization that is available, I mean, your smartwatch can give a lot of data. And in the exhibits with all the manufacturers and startups, you are seeing that that is the direction that people are going. You have a digital stethoscope, you have single lead, defibrillators, but perhaps a lot more maturity needs to happen in terms of acceptable AI, because you cannot leave the doctor out of it. Data would need to assist the doctor to be more efficient, more sure, so that there is more confidence both from the patient side and the doctor side. And this data, longitudinal data of the patient in his lifetime, his or her lifetime, as well as for a particular disease state that might be considering, would need to exist. And these technologies, like the databases, big data, the cloud technologies, the ability for us to mine the data, apply algorithms on top of it, is all going to just help to make this whole process more efficient.
So from what I hear from you is that basically we are moving to a time where my information has to be from the womb to my tomb. Correct? You're talking about longitudinal data.
I would say lust to dust, because parents' genome also have a role to play.
Sure. Now I'll borrow that reference from you. You will hear me citing it elsewhere also. So with that, I come to you, Santosh. That now you have heard us discuss about patient being the focus, multiple
are actually, in fact, having islands of applications with their own silo databases, which necessarily don't communicate with each other. They may be having duplicate data with them. Then they may be having varying updates to the databases and varying data models and data schemas. So in our journey of digital transformation, in terms of what moderator asked of bringing in right approach of using data to address various aspects of the healthcare, so we are at that inflection point where we need to reimagine the entire health ecosystem and start looking at building a connect, be it healthcare providers, healthcare workers, and also a lot of actually like health tech companies, as well as various health facilities, along with their own set of applications, be it electronic medical records, diagnostic applications, social, economic, demographic data as well, onto a single platform, which would first is provide us a single source of truth. Second one is this will help us to build a very functioning and a very evolving public health registry at the state level. The unified approach today can be a force multiplier for accelerating various digital health transformations or innovations in the segment, leveraging the entire consolidated data to build various AI and ML workloads, advanced analytics, which would go ahead and policies into the play. So with that context, so while we are at the stage where we are leveraging data for a functional aspect, lot needs to be done in terms of bringing that cohesive environment so that data can be used further for bringing various digital innovations in terms of regulations, in terms of policies, in terms of data exchange, data fiduciary mechanism, and also enabling the early startups to start leveraging the data rather than they spending huge amount of effort in data engineering aspect. they can directly get into the consolidated data which is available with them and start using it for the data science activities. Yeah.
Thanks. Agnideep, do we have time for next round of questions? Okay. Thanks. Now, one thing that I'm borrowing from you for posing a question to Arvind will be, you mentioned that there is a unified approach that should be taken, which can be treated as a force multiplier in this health sector. So with that, now that we know that there is a buy-in from the government, there is willingness to change how the sector is looking at right now. But there is probably a lacking of wherewithal or resources to be deployed, which exists with the private sector. So now, Arvind, will you be able to tell us some of the experience that you have had in public-private partnerships and how probably each one of us can benefit from that, including the patients who continue to be the focus?
Yeah, I think public-private partnerships can be a real differentiator, and there's been a lot of experiences. I'd just like to highlight two or three. One, as I mentioned to you, all our programs are in close collaboration with the government. So the government knows about it. And when the government is involved very early in the stage, there's a lot of buy-in. So any technical challenges, financial challenges, policy challenges, they're in a position to sort of help you out. So that's a big advantages of public-private partnerships, and having them early in the stage itself is very good. Second, I would say is about, it's just not alone public, mean the government. We have had very good experiences of private-private partnerships also. And here I can give you an example of, to eliminate TB, we had formed an alliance called the Corporate TB Pledge. And this is totally 250 companies, Indian and US and many other companies coming together, sort of putting together policies, making sure that their workers are not stigmatized, bringing in their CSR resources for health programs. So that's a second example of how public-private partnership, public-private partnership with the PPP, private partnership coming to sort of address healthcare issues. Third, I would give as an example of one of our recent efforts is Samrit, which is a project which largely focuses on supporting digital solutions. And this is a sort of a blended financing arrangement. We support the idea. It's just not the financing part, but we give in business advisory support services, legal advisory support services, so that the digital solution is in a position to sort of address some of the key challenges. The key is some of these startups, some of these digital solutions do not have access to technical as well as capital source. So having this platform which gives them that advantage has been also one big advantage of public-private partnership.
Ashwin, will it be possible for you to throw some light on how we can accelerate the innovation that's taking place in this space to facilitate digital health?
Sure, Bhagmishra. When we talk about innovation, I think you mentioned earlier, there is a lot of innovation across the patient journey in terms of value chain, right? From selecting your, selecting your doctor, getting your medicines delivered to diagnostics and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of innovation, a lot of data that's being already collected from a patient level. Now, what needs to really happen is how can we break these silos, right? Which is what we talked about. A good parallel is from the banking, financial, insurance industry. With the advent of the UPI unified, there was a way in which, yes, these were silos before, but now there was a easy, secure, trusted way in which these two institutions can exchange data in a good way, and which would be beneficial for the customer. Also, it brought in hyper-personalized, I'd say, offers for that particular customer, which has a lot of parallels. And can we innovate in some way in which we can help break these silos by bringing in these connections between these very important but silos? That was one. The other one is, Santosh talked about bringing the data together, right? That's one of the innovations that we can we innovate in terms of bringing a product that accelerates the speed of data to insights, right? And help democratize it, right? And ensure that companies are able to use that as a building block and innovate on top of that, right? So all the data massaging, quality control, everything is already done, and now you have industrialized the analytics, and now you can really build on top of that rather than waiting on that. No, but how do you enable it? The idea is to ensure that you have incubators on focusing on these specific, small things, as well as adopting more of a minimum viable product approach rather than waiting for the best possible solution. Incubate, try to get to a solution, and then try to make a difference.
Ashwin. Now, Murli, from what Ashwin just mentioned, that while in fintech we are kind of leading in terms of the solutions that we are rolling out, that's kind of the opposite in healthcare. We already have a heterogeneous system, and we are lacking quite a lot while still buying in from both the sides. My question to you would be specific that in terms of implementation, I understand you work both with Indian clients as well as overseas clients. Now, how does implementation in India suffer, or where are there any shortcomings as compared to a advanced jurisdiction like the European Union or the US?
Yeah, I think from my standpoint, I see a lot of positives as well as a country, right? In terms of one, having a vision on what we want to do. Recently, you mentioned about a lot of policies that are awaiting signatures. I think that will give a lot of guidelines and a very digital mindset. Arvind talked about how we adapted into this digital currency UPI. I mean, no other country at this size can even imagine transforming into that kind of a digital current transactions in a matter of 5-6 years. So that gives me a lot of confidence as a country, as large as we are flexible. Again, there are different parts, how the urban reacts and how the rural ones happen. But by and large, I think we have been pretty successful in the UPI, and I think that mindset will continue. In terms of challenges, I think we will fall upon the same hurdle some of the other developed nations had. I mean, you can put all the policies at the central government. I think the implementation will be ending up with state level. I think each of the states need to have that kind of a leadership to really execute on that roadmap and be able to drive that. Healthcare talent is something we should start looking at, both in terms of nursing talents. I know Rupa and I were talking earlier. It's going to be very critical when you are driving this kind of a change management, you have the right staffing. And also to develop the technology, right? There are very few universities even offer that kind of HID curriculum with less than 10, in my opinion. I think those are areas probably we can start looking at and building right now so that we can accelerate our journey, because we don't have to follow the same path as a US or a Europe. We can have our own journey, but I think with the talent we have, and if you take the right steps, we'll be in for a pretty good ride.
Thanks, Murli. Rupam, now that Murli has mentioned that we already have a lot of talent and you already have had the opportunity to work with a lot of startups in this space.
Yes.
Do you have any key takeaways for any startups here or private stakeholders who want to get into this segment?
Yeah, the good thing about working with so many startups, and in fact, in TCS, we have a formal setup where we collaborate with a lot of startups and other players in the ecosystem. We call it COIN. It's a co-innovation network. And now it has spread its base all over the world. So, and we learn from some of the hiccups that we have had. So it's very important. I think in healthcare specifically, collaborating early with the healthcare practitioner and not focusing only on technology is very important. Because as technologists, we tend to get swayed by the possibilities that data can bring, designs can bring. But it's very important to understand that engineering and clinical practitioners have a completely different outlook into the thing. You can take any therapy for that matter, dental implants for that matter. Engineers don't think about the nerve in your jawbone. Engineers think about the shape and the metal and the process and the instrumentation, all those things. So it's very important to get early engaged with the clinical practitioners and ensuring that the adoption is very important, because this is not like a iPhone that Steve Jobs will give in the hands of people because he knows what they want. Here, I think it's a very difficult thing to just bring in technology and ensure that it will be adopted. And the whole ecosystem also has to accept it, including nurses. For example, if you're developing, just hypothetically speaking, a new infusion technology, unless the actual caregiver, the nurses, are buying into it, there won't be any adoption, despite all of the technical benefits that you have. So similarly, I think developing now these modern technologies we are seeing the startups here as well as some of the work that we have done with startups. Radiology is a great field. I mean, the CT scan machine is now the size of a table, like a bench table. There are companies which have brought it to that size now. But is that the issue? No, the issue is with the data and what you do with it. So it's easier to create services around the data, but at the same time, the practitioner and the value of what that brings to the practitioner as well as the patient is very important. And we should be very clear early in the beginning before we invest time and money into a business about this whole ecosystem. And economics is a given. It's still a great market. I think India, the per capita spending is so less. For commendable to see so many players out there. I think myself, the culture also, because India has a unique thing about the variety of language. For example, if you make tools available, for example, if you make voice interactions, you have to be conscious about the language needs, especially if you want to go to the rural sector, you have to be more conscious about it. So these aspects of our country also needs to be, thought about right up front before you can hope for an adoption and making commercial success out of it. I'm leaving the government discussion out of it. I think enough has been talked about it. But I see that that is not a challenge. It can be understood. The regulation is clear enough. Brilliant people are policymakers. So I think that can be handled.
Thanks, Rupam. Somehow we have been able to manage to increase the number of attendees since we started. So, Santosh, I have a question for you. Now that Rupam mentioned that there has to be interaction between what the engineers are trying to create and what the practitioner needs, or the healthcare worker needs to be able to converse with the patients, do you think we have tools, do we have appropriate tools and solutions in existence which can use or exploit the data that's already in existence to bring about some harmonization and standardization in an extremely disoriented network that we look at right now?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question what you posed. If you see, the health segment in the lens of the data, this is actually truly a big data world. Here you'll be having the data sets which are cutting across all types of data, be it structured data, unstructured data, semi-structured data, images, and also a lot of other data sets in the form of Excel as well as files and CSVs. When we see it from that lens, it's quite a heterogeneous mix there. So if you see the other perspective, if you see from the health practitioner's perspective, for him, data is data. So as a typical engineering mindset, we are always an enabler for a domain. So we need to make sure that we kind of bring that kind of a knowledge as well as those kind of mechanism where we can make the data more seamless to the end user, where we make more sense, we can derive more sense out of the data for the end user. So from the tech perspective, today we have reached a stage where we can comfortably say we do have those kind of mechanisms as well as APIs which can define the industry standards and the protocols for doing various activities with the data. When we see the data as a commodity progressing in its journey from the point where it is created, ingestion mechanism, all the way till where it is stored, where it is processed, and how it is analyzed, we do have the APIs which can define the industry standards and the protocols and the formats which provide that platform to seamlessly integrate, ingest, as well as transform the data into the format in which the various end user applications consume it, be it front end mobile applications or back end and ML workloads which need curated data to build various insights, to bring out various actionable points out of the data. So we do have the platform which has the capabilities of ingesting and converting the data to the required formats and use the data in a more meaningful way. So we do have from Google as well, we do have cloud healthcare APIs which do the entire activities for us. And also industry is kind of going ahead and developing those various protocols and various parameters. And one thing I just want to note, while we do have the various data types which are there in the industry, there has been a convergence in terms of addressing and storing the health data with respect to FHIR, what we call it. That is the format which is being defined, which kind of makes it much easier for you to store the data as well as exchange the data across the various stakeholders. So those things have been taken into account. Those things are getting more importance now when we create those applications. So I think it's not that long before we have a very connected, cohesive environment for all the stakeholders to interact with the system. Yeah.
With that, we come to a closure of this discussion. But before we move into question and answer, I would like to surmise this conversation so as to say that we have the law. We also have a lot of data that's available and that's being created, from wearables to going into centers to actually speaking to a chatbot on a consultation platform, or for that matter, speaking into Google and asking questions about our health conditions. Now, the thing is that we heard that there are tools, there is availability of data, but still we are lagging some way or the other. One of the things that I want to drive home to each one of you is that we are also one of the only jurisdictions in the world within the healthcare laws where we clearly say that the patient is the owner of the data. No other law goes on to say it in the as many terms. So where we already have empowered our patients, we still see that there's a lack in uptake amongst the patients or end users for whatever reasons. It could be that they are not comfortable with speaking to a computer. They feel they are more vulnerable or exposed because the data could be leaked, could be breached, could be seen by people who are not authorized to do that. So these could be several other reasons. So one appeal that I actually have to each one of you as a consumer and as a lawyer is that a lot of awareness still has to be created, not just from the perspective of who is implementing it, but also who has to consume it. Because I mean, at the end of the day, patients are the data sets or the creators of those data sets. So as long as we do not have them wanting to get into this ecosystem, most of our tools will not reach the end objective that we all intend to do. Now, with that, do we have time for like one or two sentences from each one of the panelists
I
to
just
wrap
want to
up?
comment on what you said. See, I mean, all of us have seen the last decade, and we talked about the UPI adoption. I think our country is unique and our society is unique in the sense that if something starts and it is good, it will explode. So something as simple as saying, okay, here is the standard. We have done an interaction with a care provider. Here is your data in this format. Here's your Aadhaar number. It's up there. Patient doesn't need to know. He doesn't need to know technology. If that's a simple mandate that the entire encounter with all the diagnosis, prescription, everything can be coupled, and with a date, once the encounter is over, patient leaves the clinic, it's mandated, you just couple it into this format and upload it somewhere. And that access and the right to access of that data remains with me as a patient. I think once this starts, it has to start. And I have seen, I think in our lifetimes also, our country is so unique that frankly, when I go from the my metro station in Delhi to my home, I pay my rickshawala with UPI. I don't use cash. I don't have any question about the level of education. He knows how to use this. As simple as that. So similarly in healthcare also, I foresee that once it starts and people see the goodness of it, it's just going to explode. Then the problems we will have is really with storage space. Who pays for it? Those are the issues we have. And that's where I think that perhaps the government could step in. Because at the macro level, the government can benefit a lot from the analytics, that capabilities that they will have towards the healthcare, slicing and dicing the data. Of course, with privacy, keeping privacy in mind, confidentiality in mind, and security, of course, because there'll be a lot of other players who will want access to the data for the not the right reasons. So as long as the technology provides that safety and privacy, I think I am very positive that it will explode.
No, can you hear me? Yeah. Just to summarize, I would echo what Rupam said. I see that we are at an inflection point. We have the will, we have the policies getting in place, we have the infrastructure in place, we have the tool in place, we have the innovations that are happening. I think we are at an inflection point. The goal is, I had narrated a story in the beginning of how my my driver and his wife didn't have a great experience. Only 5% of India is getting access to the right treatment and the best treatment. I'm hoping that will turn around very soon with this. I'm very hopeful that will happen very soon.
Yeah, I think nothing much to add. Still, people remains the first priority for me. And then I also understand, like when we meet with policymakers or program managers, there's a sort of a catching around and their understanding of various applications, softwares has been a challenge. So if there is something like a repository, I think NHA National Health Accounts is doing something like that called Compare. So you just they can sort of quickly put a thing and they compares it with certain parameters. So that's become a very useful tool for policymakers or even program managers when they take decisions. So something like that would be very, very helpful in the long run, is what I would say.
Just a couple of observations as what we discussed here as well. It gives a good assurance that health as a sector itself is kind of reimagining itself. And also it's a very evolving subject. I think we are on the right trajectory, and going forward will be quite interesting times for all the stakeholders in the ecosystem, be it tech players as well as the caretakers themselves, as well as the beneficiaries. I think each one is going to benefit with all the innovations what digital segment is going to drive into the segment.
So I'm the last man standing between you and dinner. I think as much as I think about, spend a lot of time in hospitals and EMRs. I think for India, what would make most sense is to combine. One is the medical aspect of it. The other is the social aspect. If you look at the overall wellness of a person, only 20% of it is from the medical problems. 80% of it is from their economic backgrounds, a lot of other things. I think our programs need to address broadly and drive that kind of a very focused population health management that kind of gives the biggest benefits and accelerate the process. Other than that, like I said, I'm very positive about just the nation as a whole, how we adapt to things, and a lot of good points Rupam also made around adoption. So thanks.
Thank you, everybody, for your time. Thank you, moderator.
I thank the moderator as well as all the panelists for an educative session. Thank you very much, sir. And looking forward to meet you all tomorrow morning at the same venue for one more good day. Thank you. Good night.